Thank you. Welcome everyone to the May 23rd Winchester Planning Board meeting. We are in person for the first time in a while, and so welcome to all of our guests in the audience as well as everyone out in TV land. We have a quorum this evening and we have name tags, so.
Present, I Ching.
I Ching. I'm Diogerius, Chair.
Sally Dale, Vice Chair.
Nick Rosettos, present.
Carrie Layton, present.
Okay, thank you. So we have, let's see, we are running a bit late this evening, so let's go through updates somewhat quickly. I had an electronics failure, so I don't have all of my updates. The big thing that is coming up is we are going to be seeing a packet for the Waterfield lot coming in soon, the Civico project. The sticking point seems to be they're still in conversation with the MBTA over a patch of land which apparently is owned by the MBTA, and so they are in discussions to finalize access of some permanent sort to that land. They are looking at an October permit where they would like to get this whole permitting process done by October. And that is driven by the fact that they need to get various grants and funds through a competitive process before the state. And typically that process, people who apply for that, this is because of their affordable housing. Typically, you don't get it in the first round. It's essentially the state says, oh, you exist, and they wait for the next year. So, but they would like to try to get into that process by the beginning of, well, they say they need to have it done by October. That's when they would like to have this done. So that is a really tight timeline. And one of the questions before the board will be is how comfortable the board is in moving forward with this process while there's still uncertainty about access to this parcel. There is every evidence that access will eventually be obtained. And if we don't begin the permitting or the hearing, et cetera, process until that happens, we might set the project back by several years.
I'm sorry, Dio, I missed the parcel that you were referring to.
There's a slim piece of land which I believe is right next to the railroad tracks, which is owned by the MBTA. And it is needed by Civico for their project. And they have been discussions between the town and Civico and the MBTA for some time trying to move forward. There's apparently bureaucracy involved. And so the idea is they will hopefully, everything points towards this land eventually being available on a permanent basis for the project, but it is not in hand yet. So one of the things if this board were to wait until that process to get that land, if we were to wait for it to be completed, that would set this project back at least a year, probably more, because of the cycle.
They need that land for a construction process, or they need the land for square footage for the lot and the building?
I am not completely clear on that. I just know that they need it as it's part of their project. So there is no legal, there's nothing legal which prevents us from moving forward with the hearing process, because we can obviously condition the final permit on them having access to the land, which they need in order to work. So I think that it would be in the best interest of getting this project going that this board, we don't have they haven't submitted to the planning board yet. But when they do submit, I think it's in the best interest to start the process of the hearing before our board, go through the whole special permit process, get our 53G consultants and all of that. And then if it comes to October, provide a conditional permit based upon them getting access to the land. So when they go to the state, they will be able to say, we do have an approval as much as is possible for this to go forward. So town council, I had a meeting with town council and the town manager yesterday to talk about what the timeline would be and what the considerations would be. And so there are no legal obstacles to us moving forward because it would always be conditional. They couldn't, do anything until they had access to that land. So if they were to come before us, the soonest we would be able to even think about it would be sort of, I don't know, I have that date written down. It would be at the end of June when they would, and it was sort of, the first meeting would essentially be them making a presentation to the board and to the community, and then we would key up all the 53G consultants. So we would have water and sewer, design, what else do I have? Any other consultants we thought were important. The one big thing on this project is they actually have to put in a water line. Apparently there isn't a water line going down Waterfield, which seems ironic, but they do need to put a water line in, and so that is something that we're going to have an engineering look at. The idea is that we would possibly get all of the external reviews done by mid-August, and then we'd also have a traffic consultant, of course. And then we wouldn't begin public hearings. So on the more technical things like water and sewage, that we could probably do those during the summer. But things like design and traffic, we would do obviously in the fall when people are back from their vacations. And so this is a tight schedule. So that's it. So that's sort of an update on that project. It's a big one.
Before
I think
we
it'll
move
be,
on,
oh, sorry.
before we move on, so this project is obviously very tied to our obligations to 40B requirements, and I know we're out of the safety zone. So is there a time frame that this permit needs to be in before counting towards something, right? Like I'm not certain on
I think the clock starts ticking when the permit is.
So with the state, do they have a deadline also saying, you must be in by a certain date?
I think
or
it
not
rolls.
counted toward?
I think it rolls. I think it's a
Okay.
rolling thing,
Right,
but
okay.
I can look that up. I was hoping John Serbier would be here, but he's not, so he would be able to answer that better than I. So that was my big update. The next update was that the Town Planner Search Committee met last week. We had, I believe, 5 resumes which came in. We identified one person as a possible candidate. We're seeing a lot of people who have very limited experience who are applying. So we're people who have just barely gotten their master's or are going to get their master's, and not a lot of people with actual experience in the field, as it were. The committee voted, I'm going to reach out to this one person and see whether they are still interested. And so the position is open at least through the end of June. So we are going to be reviewing new candidates as they come through. We also talked at that meeting about the interim planner position, and we identified a person from the first batch that we thought might be appropriate to contact about that, and I'm going to do that and see if they are interested. And we do have to get, I know, Sally, that you gave Suzanne a write-up on the planner, the interim planner.
Right, and she sent it to you for final review
Yes.
before she sends it to Michael.
Right, and I have not yet reviewed
Okay,
that, so
yeah.
hopefully I'll
Michael
get that done tomorrow, and so we'll post that, and then that will go out.
For the interim planner, there was a woman who worked here, Betsy Ware, I think, and she's
That's-
retired now, isn't she?
No, I think she's a planner in Newton. I
don't think
can't
so.
remember. You think,
Uh,
okay, well,
She might be someone that would be available, possibly.
well, that would, it would be an open search. We would, once it's posted, we
Right.
could,
I don't know, I mean,
I know she was, when she left us, she moved on to another municipality, but I thought she was still there, but possibly not. And of course, Googling Betsy Ware will not get me anywhere right now.
were you encouraged, I guess, by the prospects of the interim planner at the meeting?
I'm sorry,
Were you encouraged by
the,
prognosis for getting an interim?
I
planner?
don't think so. I think that we are, that it'll be a longer process than we hoped to find a senior level planner who
But
would,
even for the interim, I mean,
for the interim, I think we could probably find someone for the interim. They would need, again, a lot of the people who are applying for our senior position don't have a lot of experience. And so the person that I'm going to be speaking with doesn't have experience in Massachusetts, which, as we all know, is a unique place to be in town government. But they do have other experience, so one would hope that, being out in the field for a while would give you enough flexibility to handle. There are a couple of people from the two batches of resumes who are in the area, so they would be able to hopefully start up quickly. That's one of those things.
As an interim.
As an interim, yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense, I think, to have someone that we need to bring up to speed over 6 months, so. So that's it for the updates.
sounds like, Sally, you're gonna give an update on Holden Street with your packet later?
Not Holton,
Not
North
Holden.
Main.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so we
It's
have,
more than an update, it's a deep dive.
It's a deep dive, right?
Yeah.
yeah, it's a deep dive. So, Mr. Levitt, I hoped would be here this evening. So we are going to open the public hearing on 1016 Mount Vernon.
Okay, so why are we having a public hearing if that part of the process has been closed?
No, we're open, did I say, it's a continuation of our hearing. Our hearing is, the whole thing is called the
But
hearing.
it's been closed, I mean, we're in
Just have to
deliberation
open
now.
it to
It's
discuss
still, the
it.
hearing itself is open, but the public
I
comment
see,
part.
okay.
So it's still a continuation of the hearing. The public hearing is technically it's called. So over the weekend, we had a flurry of communications from Mr. Levitt. And some of them are in our packet. And this evening, or this afternoon, he sent a letter to the board requesting a withdrawal without prejudice, I believe. I don't think that made it into the packet, because the packet.
No, I
I
think
got
it
the
did.
email, or
Yeah, we have an email, but we don't have it in the
Oh,
packet.
I see, it's, yeah.
And of
he-
course, I didn't put it on the USB stick. So, I think there is I think if we just move to the latest thing before us, which is a request for withdrawal.
Yep.
We can dispense with all of the different designs, and all of the other, associated things. I'm trying to find this letter so I can read it into the record. And for some,
3:46 PM, if that helps,
if I were in the right mailbox,
or
yes.
something was.
Yeah,
Do you want me to read it?
no, I got it. Somewhere, okay, so, the letter is a very short letter. It reads, Dear Diabjarius, at this time I would like to withdraw without prejudice our application for a third floor addition at 1016 Mount Vernon Street. Appreciate your consideration. Thank you, John Levitt, manager, 1016 Mount Vernon Street, LLC. So, the memo that I sent out that is in the packet talked a little bit about prejudice and not prejudice in terms of our voting. And Can we bring that up just,
Oh, I don't have the computer. This is not my computer. I don't.
oh, it should be in the packet, though.
Is it?
I hope so. Maybe it's not in the packet.
Email from Jay?
No, emailed from
No,
me.
I don't
That didn't
think
make
it-
Oh,
no.
darn it. Oh, no, it says draft. Is that mine? Keep going up.
No, those are minutes.
Oh, those are
I
minutes.
didn't see it today.
Okay, well,
Things
so,
were moving fast this weekend, so.
okay,
I
so,
mean, I think after, anyway.
well, let me just go into what it means to withdraw with and without prejudice, and then we can go into a discussion. So, a draw without prejudice means that you can bring back essentially the same project to the board within a 2-year period. After 2 years, you can bring any sort of project you want. But withdrawal without prejudice means that they can come back with the same one. It requires a simple majority of the board to vote if they want to go that route. Mr. Levitt is entertaining the thought, he presented new designs which would increase the number of units and add an affordable unit. And so that would be that's, I believe, the stuff I sent over the weekend from him was showing that.
I didn't understand, he sent over something that would increase the number of units?
So he wanted to match the roof line, I believe, of the building next door.
Yeah, so,
Don't take time in this meeting because it's,
yeah, so the idea is
That's a
that
whole other project. I mean.
it's
that would
a
have to be
whole
brought-
other project.
That would have to be brought in from scratch.
It would have
The
to
only
be
thing
brought
we-
from scratch.
The only thing we need to know is if he withdraws without prejudice, he can't, can he bring the new
He
design?
can bring it tomorrow. I mean,
He
bring-
can-
bring
the new
design-
Without prejudice doesn't give you
So
anything.
the parameters that he would be returning with would be an addition of a story, and the internal design is kind of,
He is,
what's the break point where it's a new project, is what I'm asking.
this is essentially would be a new project.
Okay,
Because he's adding a half story.
okay, gotcha.
Instead of adding one story, it would be 1.5 plus an additional, I think, 3 units, one of which would be affordable. So
I
that's a
missed that
totally
in the
different, that's a
information.
totally different project.
Okay, so
And
he's
so
kind of,
that would have to come in completely new.
okay, so withdrawing without prejudice on this project is kind of leaving it on the back burner for 2 years in case he needs to go back to it.
No,
or
it's,
Well-
no, it's
The
not.
2 year doesn't
If you
apply if
deny
it's
it, it's
without.
leaving it on the back burner for 2 years. If you
I-
withdraw without prejudice, he can come back next week and do the same thing.
But
over
with the
again.
same thing, not with this
Yeah.
extra half story in the new unit.
I think Mr. Levitt understands that he doesn't have the 4 votes required to move this existing project forward.
Okay,
So I don't see that withdrawal with or without prejudice. I think he understands that the project that he brought forward wasn't going to get the 4 votes required.
okay,
The new project, I haven't seen all of the details, but because it does have an affordable housing component, would come in under the housing choice legislation where it would require only 3 votes.
gotcha. Okay,
And that's one of the reasons for changing that vote, was to encourage building affordable houses.
okay. So for this vote, we're just voting on whether to allow, or just, we don't do anything, he just withdraws.
No, he can't withdraw because we've already had a public hearing.
He can withdraw at any
He
point.
can't just withdraw without prejudice.
He cannot withdraw without prejudice, that's true, but he can withdraw with prejudice. But he is requesting withdrawal without prejudice. So,
Is he
Right, but,
requesting
I
something
mean, I
he
think that would
can't
be-
ask for? I just got confused. He's not allowed to ask to withdraw without prejudice?
No, he's not. He
he,
can ask for it, but
he-
you don't have to give it to him.
yeah,
And
withdrawing without prejudice, once it's been posted, requires approval of the body.
Right.
Because you don't want to have people putting something through the system, testing the
I mean,
waters,
all the time
pulling
we
it out.
spent on this, and now he's gonna come and withdraw without prejudice, and be able to come a week later and just make us go through the whole thing again. I don't think that gives us.
To be honest, I
think
doubt
we should
he's
vote
coming,
on it.
I doubt he's coming back with the same project, so I
Right.
don't.
But he
so-
will surely come back with a project.
No, but I think we need to vote. I think we need to see the process through after all the time we spent on it, and just vote on whether we're denying or not.
That is up to the board to decide. I mean, that's, if the,
I mean, even if we
Well, we do
deny,
have to
he
vote,
still
because
can
he's
come
not
back.
asking for what he's allowed to do, so he's
Right.
asking for our permission to withdraw without prejudice. So we
Yes.
either have to vote to
He
Right, we're
could
not
simply
gonna vote anyway.
withdraw,
Right, right. But
That's
he's not
always his
asking
right
for
to
that, so
simply
we do
withdraw.
have to vote on something.
but we don't have to vote on anything if he chooses to withdraw. If he chooses to withdraw, at this point, he hasn't, we don't have to vote on anything in the sense that we could try to vote, and if no one comes up with a vote, we can close the hearing and say we can't come to a decision, therefore this is a dead project. And so in a sense, you don't have to have a majority vote saying we are not going to permit this project, right? What you need is a majority or a supermajority vote of 4-5 saying that this project is permitted. So you can have what's the word? I forget the language already. In any case, so it's up to the board. The board can, if someone wants to put a motion,
I would like to just complete the process
Well-
and move that we deny it, just deny it. I mean, we don't have to qualify.
okay, so first,
And-
everyone
and-
understands
Let
our,
me just say that once it's denied, it can still come back in the future. We're not doing this forever. I mean, he can still come back with a different design. After 2 years, he can come back. He just can't come back in 2 weeks and, you know.
Well, he can't come back in 2 weeks
and
with the
put-
same
put
design,
the system
yes.
through what we've all been through, you know, in the time, whatever.
yeah, so let me first make sure the board understands
Yeah.
all the
Yeah, I would love
questions
to
behind
just,
us.
Yeah, let's have a
hear
recap.
you say it, if possible, what the choices are here.
So the choices we have are, we have a request to withdraw without prejudice, so that's one, we can move on that. We can have a motion for unfavorable action on the permit application. We could have a motion for favorable action with amendments. So last week, was it last week? Whenever it was, you proposed a motion to approve as is. You did not get a second.
No, yeah, well, with a couple of changes, but.
Yeah, but you
But-
didn't get a second. So that avenue, I think, is,
Right,
unless, you can always do it again.
okay, but then the denying is with prejudice or without prejudice, is the choice here too,
No, you don't have to make that. You
make
just
recommendation.
can deny.
You can just
But that
deny.
was why we postponed
Yeah,
it
there
till
is,
this
you know,
meeting.
so denial comes,
Right, but denying is just simpler, it's just simpler.
yeah, maybe I should put my memo up. Maybe that would make it easier.
And denial actually becomes a legal outcome from which stems other
that's
subsequent.
not-
That's,
I think you need to have a
So if we
resolution.
deny it,
and
when would he be
denial-
able to bring the same project back? Never, so it's
No,
technically,
Well, so-
after 2 years.
so
Yeah.
it's technically without prejudice.
okay. Let me
No.
first, I don't know how to use
Oh, you have to
Windows here,
wait.
so let me see what happens when I do this. Can I just eject this puppy?
Okay, so there's like three, it branches into three options.
Eject. Which one do I eject?
Diab, I noticed that in the audience is a person who wishes to speak on the legal matters.
Yes, but I have spoken with town council, and so I appreciate that, but I first want to get the board to understand, how the heck do I get rid of this darn thing? Where's the eject button?
Eject for what?
I want to eject the
Right-click
USB.
it, right-click it.
I did right-click it, and it's giving, oh, there it is. I right-clicked on the wrong thing. I want to, I don't care, just, fudge.
Something open.
Yes, it's got a Adobe open, so we will close that. Now, I had a discussion with legal counsel about this today. I had a discussion with legal counsel about this last week. And I just want to give you the results of that discussion. I'll just continue. I don't know what your problem is. It's in the memo. It's in the memo. That's the whole point, is I wrote the memo so that it would be in one place. That was the whole point.
Do you, are you looking for the memorandum? What do we have access to on this computer? Your computer? Do you want to know when you sent it? Does that help?
I sent it out, I believe it was last,
Friday, the
Friday.
19th at,
yeah, so let me, sent items.
do you want me to just forward it to you now and see what happens? Maybe it'll pop up in your,
You could do that if it,
I have it on my computer,
Oh.
would that help at all?
Yeah,
But
can
I
you
I don't
just-
know how, oh shoot, no, that you're asking me way too much tech.
can you just, do you have a big, one of these guys?
Oh shoot.
it should be in the top of your Outlook if you refresh it.
Oh, yeah. That's pressure.
Okay, I found it. You can give me that stick back and I can,
Oops.
that's okay. So much easier when we were on Zoom.
I was thinking that.
All right, so
Okay.
So from this, they can't withdraw it after the public hearing's been posted.
Yeah, yeah. So,
I mean, if we deny it, they still can come back after 2 years, which
So
seems,
if
it seems like a
it's
reasonable
2
period
years,
of
I mean,
time.
downtown's gonna be different in 2 years.
so the
that's
key
the-
thing
So
is-
that's, I
just
think that's
deny
a,
the
that's
action
a
and
good
there.
period of time, I think. I
And it
mean,
seems like we're gonna have to process a new application anyway. and we
Right.
could-
so
Can you say
MGL
what you
chapter
just said
48, it's MGL chapter 48.
There's a,
Sorry.
No, go.
MGL Chapter 40A, Section 16 is the law which governs how special permits are handled by special permit granting authorities. And the language doesn't mention denial with or without prejudice. All it says is that if a petition has been unfavorably acted upon, in order for, it requires a 4/5 majority of the board to determine that there are specific and material changes in the project in the context of the conditions which caused the unfavorable action.
that's if they want to come back within the 2 years.
That's if
But
they want to
if-
come
if-
back
if
within
they-
the 2
you know,
years.
If
Right.
they wait the 2 years, which seems a reasonable period of time,
Right.
then, you know, we deny it and then they come back in 2
Right.
years. That's,
But there is no concept, getting to your point, there is no concept of denial with or without prejudice. There is merely unfavorable action, which can take the form either of the inability to achieve the necessary vote threshold or a affirmative denial. And so those are the things before us.
okay.
And so there is, so
Okay.
and I spoke with council this morning about how do you determine which conditions are the ones which resulted in unfavorable action in the particular case where you don't have a majority saying this is a bad project, as it were. Because if you have a minority if you don't achieve the majority for approval, and then you have a vote for denial and you don't achieve a majority for denial, then you have a minority of the board which has conditions that they think should prevent it going forward. And how do you determine which of those conditions, because there's no consensus among the board. And town council said that you look at what's in the record and it's up to the body whoever's on the board at the time that the permit comes back to make that decision based upon what they read in the record and how they personally feel. So there isn't, and as he put it, there's very little case law on this particular subject because people typically don't go back and go through courts if they've been denied and trying to push this through. It's just not worth their while, because by the time they do all of this, the 2 years are up, and they can just go in again from new anyway. So there's not a lot of case law for making this determination.
So we wouldn't be blocking them forever.
It would not be blocking them forever.
Hiatus.
Yeah, I think the not allowing withdrawal without prejudice is an indication that the board thinks that there's really no point in another try at this project, that perhaps the developer has, or not the developer, the person, the submitting person,
The applicant.
the applicant, has been just annoying the board a lot, and you don't want to go forward. So there's, I mean, you can come up with a number of reasons why,
Well, I want
but
to,
you want to do it, I think, on basis of something that's solid, because we don't want to get sued.
I'd like to add to the mix that this is the first time that I know that he actually pulled a building permit. Everything that he's done over the years in contact with approving boards, which I guess is the planning board, even, has always been pre-application.
He did have, he did submit a permit at the beginning of COVID.
Oh, in
Uh,
2020,
And
okay.
at that time, it was really early in the COVID period, and so he withdrew without prejudice, before we really even got
Right.
started.
Right, so, yeah.
So,
Okay,
and in
that's
a
helpful
sense,
to know.
this is the first time
It was
it's hit the.
opposed it was opposed, at that point in time by multiple boards in 2020.
But the key board was this board.
Right.
So, and so, and this board did not reach a decision in any form, because there was we never really did anything on it.
Mhm.
So we don't,
So you're suggesting that there's a couple of different choices for a motion that the board could vote on, if I'm not mistaken. One is that we vote unfavorable action. And do we have to say why?
No.
And then if you get the supermajority vote, it's done.
I think that if we vote unfavorable action, then we do need to say why, because we have to indicate which parts of our zoning bylaws this did not meet. We do have criteria, and so if you're going to say no, then I think that you do have to say why, because it has to be something, it's a decision this board will have to defend, and we can't defend it without a record.
Is that
I mean,
routine
we've got
practice?
several zoning bylaws that this is in conflict with.
If there's a motion to be made, then,
I would like to make a motion to deny.
okay,
And looking for my notes.
So, can I ask a question, Nick, while you're looking? So it would be 8.2.4, section of our zoning bylaw, that is the special permit criteria that we would draw from for our reasons.
first, let's take a look at the specifics of the CBD.
They're in the DRC minutes.
Yeah, we can, I just want to get directly to the zoning bylaw. I can't use that, that's the wrong.
Is that routine practice for the planning board to name zoning bylaws in the denial of an application?
For a special permit, we
Okay.
have to be, yeah,
Okay.
this is.
I just didn't know if we were setting a new precedent here.
No, we have to write if this passes, then we need to write a decision, and the decision has to indicate why we
Okay.
reached this conclusion.
Okay.
So the zoning bylaw 7.3.15.5, general standards for site plan review number 7
I don't think we have
is
internet.
one reason.
Okay, I'm sorry,
What's
say
the
that again,
reason?
Nick, I didn't get that.
Zoning bylaw 7.3.15.5, which talks about general standards for site plan review.
Okay, good.
Number 7. So I'd like to And then there are regulations,
Oh, so which one of that 7.3.15?
Number 7.
Number 7, protection and preservation of existing historic structures,
right,
vistas, and natural features.
right. And then in the Center Business District, regulations governing 7.3 of the Center Business District, section 5.10.1, where it talks about flat roofs, additional stories should be designed to minimize the visual impact on the proportions and massing of the original structure. So this doesn't do that. So I'd like to call that also as a.
Can you read that citation again?
Yes, the citation is the regulations governing section 7.3, Center Business District.
Right, and they,
CBD, section 5.10.1.
Great, thank you.
Flat roofs. So I'd like to call those two as support for my motion. To deny favorable action.
Okay.
And again, it's not forever, but I think that we need to bring this to a conclusion that's not, okay, we're just gonna do nothing.
Okay, so we have a motion to deny based on, and I hope you folks have.
5.10.1 of the regulations governing section 3.5, and then also from the zoning bylaw itself,
7.3.15,
0.5,
item 7.
paragraph 7, yeah.
Nancy, did you get that? More or less? Okay.
Point of order,
I got you.
I got it.
Yes.
you also have to address special permit criteria, because what Nick quoted was for site plan review.
Oh, that's right, it was.
So
But,
special permit's 9.4, I'll just give you that much, so you guys can all look at it. and you'll
Thank you.
find it.
yeah, I'm trying to, I think I might just put the
Yeah,
PDF.
I don't have those notes, which have all the notes on them.
Yeah, I'll just bring it up.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I've
Thank you,
been
Maureen.
trying to find a physical copy so I can put it up on the,
Yeah, 9.4.2 is the criteria.
I'll have an old version of ours from
Well, it's
20.
9.4.2. I don't know what you call them, paragraphs, subparagraphs, whatever. Subsection 8. 9.4.2.
Which says impacts on historic resources as defined in section 10 of this bylaw.
And jumping to 10, so 9.4.2.8. Oh, I see, that's the, okay, that's the definitions.
Yeah, that's,
Here we are.
Okay, so this is I think the last paper copy I ever got before it went.
Right, so it's
But I think it's
under
still
paragraph
valid.
B of the definition, which is, the building has a historical significance, contributing historical significance to a registered historic district.
Okay, oh, this is even,
Thanks.
oh, this is the horrible one from the website. Sorry, this is not the last actual nice version we had. Okay, so,
9 point, where are you going?
I will get to 9.
Okay, 7.3.15 is what you're
So let
starting
me
with.
just, we're at 7.3, so let's get there.
7.3.15.5.
Okay, general that's site plan review, but we're not doing site plan review.
So try 9.4.2.8.
There is actually a whole thing on special permits and Okay, let's go to the general ones for. Area, special, no, where, did I miss special permit already? Special permits, there we go.
9.4,
Okay,
2.
942, and we're looking at, where's historical? This is, I think we reorganized this at some point.
No.
But it's in there, impacts on historic resources, and again, this is an old version of the bylaw, so.
I'm online to the
You're online, yeah, I wanted people to be able to see it.
9.4 point, what you just said, too.
Yeah, I thought oh, no, we did it, okay. No,
Well,
the
under 9.4.2, there's one section called impacts on neighborhood character. There's another one that's number 8, which is called impacts on historic resources.
Okay, these look to be the same as what's currently online, so I think that's valid. So 9428 is one, and,
And if we disagree with the recommendations of any other town agency or official,
Yep.
we shall explain our position in its written decision.
so I think under this one, Nick, that's the one under the special permit criteria for that.
942.
9428, and then you had, let's go and use this. Let's go back to,
And then 7315.5, is that the other one?
Yeah,
Oh, that was-
7.
but that was for, that was for site plan review? Okay,
Yeah.
that's not what,
I want to get to the submission requirements, blah, blah, guidelines. Okay, historic resources, these are incentives.
I had detailed notes, but unfortunately, with the move to live, I
Oh,
didn't
yeah.
make the transition.
yeah, I know, it's tough, you're used to having.
But I still think this is good.
Okay,
At least I don't have my fluffy slippers on.
so we have a motion,
a
and I
loss.
think the special permit was 9428, that was the,
Yep, and
and is there a second?
I second it.
Oh, you seconded it?
Yeah,
Okay.
No, I said I will, I do, now,
Okay,
in the
okay.
moment that we're in.
Okay, so Nick has a motion to deny, and Sally, sorry, Sally seconds the motion. Do we want to have discussion on this?
So in this 9.4.2 part where you need to explain your reasoning if it differs from other town boards, I would like to know what the reasons are there. Well, your
So the Historic Commission voted 501 in favor of this project. The Design Review Committee has voted unanimously in opposition. So I think it would behoove the board to know what the,
I mean, this whole set of buildings is a contributing, it's a contributing building to the National Register of Historic Places. The massing is gonna be completely thrown off. I think as I mentioned in my presentation last week, it was clearly designed. We don't know who the architect was, but it was a clearly designed. It was, it has authenticity. There's a word, intact. It's an intact structure, and the preservation word is integrity. And this is a definition that the National Register of the U.S. Department of Interior uses. And I would also add that last week when I made the presentation that I showed a map with some red and green markings on there, and the red were the historic buildings, and those were delineated by the Center Business District as buildings that should be protected, as
Contributing.
intact historic buildings that are contributing to the National Register of the U.S. Department of Interior.
So can I ask you a question, Nick? So the zoning bylaw is explicit in this, in that it intends for some development to be made involving historic structures. It provides incentives for protection. It provides for reduction in parking requirements if you are adding to or changing the use of a historic structure. So what about this historic structure sets it aside
I think I
from
answered
the-
that when I said that we believe it was designed by someone. It is a extraordinary example of a colonial revival building that was done in 1890, but it has a look of 1920. It's an interesting building, and it places it in time. And I mean, I think it should be protected. I think that's my opinion.
So you think that this is an exemplary structure, and that's why it should be protected, and that there are perhaps other structures downtown which are not so exemplary?
I think we have precious few historic buildings in the center, and there are so many opportunities to develop a myriad of buildings that are in the center or next to historic buildings. But the handful of historic buildings are kind of pulling outsized weight in their importance in defining the historic village that is Winchester Center. And especially at this juncture, I don't feel comfortable altering this tiny handful of buildings that make that contribution and kind of define the town as a historic village, and the look. I guess this, in addition to the bylaws that we brought up, that's really what I am resting my case on, I guess.
So if I could get this straight, the bylaws, there are 3, and 2 of them rested on historic reasons for, it was historic vista structure, and then this one was on historic resources. And so, the historical committee said 501. And the other one was on setbacks, right? On flat roofs. Flat roofs should have, or they should have some kind of method to distinguish itself from the original. And setting it back is one example of how that could be done, right?
Right.
So you're setting in that flat roofs, if we could pull that particular language up, I would really appreciate that, because I'm having trouble with it as a must, or is it a recommendation,
This is section
right?
5.10.1 of the regulations governing 7.3? Is that what you're speaking
The
of?
flat roof
Flat roofs,
one
yes.
that you guys are citing as,
So there's 2 documents for our listeners in the audience. We have both the zoning bylaw, and we also have a set of design regulations which go along with it. And the zoning bylaw does speak about, when we go to the design review section, it talks about, and again, I apologize, maybe I can just page down here. There we go.
So in 5.10.1, the perhaps salient sentence is that additional stories should be designed to minimize visual impact on the proportions and massing of the original structure. And it says the most common approach to meeting this is to step the additions back from the facade or the side building plane.
right, so that's one approach. And
Right.
it's not saying that that's the only approach.
In addition,
Okay, so let's see where it says here.
That's what it says.
I think also that we have to be cognizant of the fact that I think this is a bad precedent. I think that, I mean, once you start altering one of the handful of historic buildings,
I think it's 27 contributing resources.
21 now,
Oh.
that the 6 have been torn down.
Okay, so 21 remaining
Right.
contributing assets to the historic resource designation.
Yeah, I think it's a bad precedent. I mean, yeah, there are just very few, particularly in the center. I mean, you can count them.
So, I'm trying to, so this is, I would have to go and find,
5.10,
so this is silhouette, I should be shaped, be increasingly slender, no, that's not it.
it's under section 5 of, are you, of the code, of the regulations?
I don't have the regulations.
Oh,
Well, that's the problem,
I
is
mean, we
once
can add
again, we
that. I
are
mean-
stymied by the lack of internet access.
That's not wrong.
right.
So, let me,
Section 5 of the regulations is guidelines for existing historically significant buildings, and this is certainly one of them.
okay, let me go and once more.
Do you want to see this?
I don't want to put it up. I mean, I really want to, you know, if we're going to discuss this, see if I can figure out how to eject the darn thing again. Oh, yeah, just continue. It'll be happy. It'll figure it out.
I guess while you're doing that, I don't know if many of you are familiar with this survey results for the Winchester Master Plan. It's a brochure that came out. And it was a survey of,
Is that during the master plan process?
yeah, during the process, 786 residents, which is a nice sampling. I mean, it's not like the little samplings we get. And out of that, there's a section on historic resources. It says that 91% of respondents agreed that preserving the historic quality of town center is important. And they said that historic structures are part of the distinctive character of Winchester, which is, you don't really see 91% in polls.
That's pretty,
I mean, it's 786 of Winchester residents.
and Nick, you might also refer to 5.1 of this section of the guidelines for historic buildings, and which speaks to the purpose of the guidelines, to preserve the significant historical and architectural elements of Winchester Center, which is a cohesive district comprising 19th century through early 20th century commercial, residential, and institutional structures and landscapes. An important architectural feature of the town center is the mixed-use commercial block. The town center is punctuated with buildings of extraordinary architectural form, primarily institutional structures such as churches, schools, and town hall, as well as outstanding commercial buildings. The town center also includes houses from the 19th century that are valued as records of the town's historic village.
Thank you, Sally. That was, I feel like I'm fighting shorthanded because I had all those references in my
Yeah,
palm.
that's okay.
So I
That's
appreciate that.
I
So,
have my Mac.
Sally, where is, section 5?
Section 5, which in my, it's on page 31.
31, yep. And where on 31 are we?
We're on 33 right now, if you look at the little numbers.
No, which page?
Oh, section 5, oh, I see, okay, and then it's down to 5.1 and 5.1, that's what I read.
Okay. And so, which is the one that you say deals with height?
That it deals with what?
Height. There was something about setbacks,
Oh,
It's
yeah.
flat roofs, isn't it?
flat roof, or sorry,
Well,
not.
the flat roof one was 10.1. So scrolling down to 5.10.1, it says flat roofs.
Whoops, let's go back up.
And it does say in specific terms that Additional stories should be designed to minimize the visual impact on the proportions and massing of the original structure.
All right, 5.10, and then you can scroll.
Okay.
I will stay away from that.
5.10.1, yes.
So this, I think this conversation has fleshed out what would go into the decision if it would go that way. So
Yeah.
that's important, so that we understand your concerns.
And who writes the decision?
It's a good question. We can vote
You
on
can
that.
write it,
So
that'd be fine.
I'm going to express my thoughts of why I disagree with this motion. I think it's clear from the zoning bylaws that the idea of developing or adding to historic structures was part of the bylaws.
Where?
Excuse me?
So a point of order.
A point of order, but I'm speaking.
Yeah, but where? We need to understand, everything's being.
Yes, excuse me. There's not, we're not having public input right now, thank you.
Understood, but I'm trying to understand.
Yes, I know you are, and I'm not finished with my speech yet. We have two indications at the very least, which talk about the ability to have reduced parking requirements for additions to historic structures, which indicates that the thought of adding to a historic structure was contemplated. And we do have incentives. There's actually a section in the bylaw which specifically talks about incentives for historical preservation. Let's see if we can find where.
7.3.18.2.
Thank you. Let me just get to here. Okay. Preservation incentives. So it certainly talks about what you can do to buildings which have lost stories. But if we continue in particular to the idea of parking, where is it? I had it before, and again, I have my notes, which were destroyed and my computer died.
God, how awful.
It's 7.3.20.3.
Here, I'll try to, do you
You-
want 7.3.2?
It does actually say in 7.3.18.2 that the
What happened?
decisions, the decision is developed under the provisions for site plan and design review.
Okay, so. There is a prohibition on removing historical structures if you tear them down. There's no prohibition on modifying them. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here discussing this project.
7.3.20.
So, in my mind, I don't think that an absolute rule against redevelopment of historical structures in the downtown is consistent. I'm not an architect or an architectural historian, so I can't comment on the exemplary nature of this building. I think it can have another story added to it. I think that the concerns about the design could be addressed. I think that the concerns about the wall that is presented, I think if we look at if the neighboring Lyceum building were ever to build up to its original height, we would have similar concerns there. And I don't think anyone would be against that because it can do that by right. I think that we are faced with a concern that we do not have enough affordable housing in town. And while in my remarks last time we met, I acknowledged that this perhaps isn't the first place we would like to see developed. This is the first place that we have a permit in front of us for. And the owners of the other buildings, which perhaps wouldn't be as sensitive to people if they were developed, they haven't come forward and said, you know, we want to redevelop the CVS and turn it into something like that. So I think that the need for housing is rather important. I think that this development could be done sensitively. And so I am not in favor of denial of this petition.
I mean, I tend to agree that the way that I'm reading the master plan, the zoning bylaws, are in such a way that you don't, it's not a preservation without touching anything. And I think that this particular project has preserved its facade, has improved its facade and its access for a wider demographic, including people with disabilities. And it retains its feel on the ground. And I remember this from our 10 Converse consultant too, about the importance of the feeling of the village and the ground level at a pedestrian level. And I think in this project that has been preserved and it has been added to. In addition, I do think that, you know, the design element of it, I mean, it reminds me of the story of the architect asked to renovate Museum of Modern Art in New York, and its historical site, historical building. And he said to the board, you know, I will give you a good building, but if you give me more money, I will make it disappear. Meaning, yeah, you can put a lot of money in it to make it look so, you know, just not as if you added anything to it at all.
Like it's always been there.
No, make all the additions that they needed, the square footage and all that stuff, just make it disappear in a minimalist way, in the most minimal way, sort of like Woburn Public Library in a way, that you're not even there. You're really, really, you know, giving, you know, deference to the main building, but we do have extra stuff. So, but in this particular project, it is housing, and I have never seen housing that you cannot see. And I am very, I think, adamant about that and being able to see housing and not putting too much, asking too much of whoever is before us, the applicant, the developer, to make it so that we don't actually see it. You know, if you wanted a one-bedroom apartment, and you know, I'm in the business of helping people find apartments. Within Winchester, you cannot get one except for in Parkview, a one-bedroom apartment. The ADUs might help. You know, they might add that kind of a space, but within a downtown experience, and maybe, you know, the sanctuaries are going to add to that, but they are very far from the downtown area. We do not have that kind of space for people who need that. And I do think that seeing us sort of value housing as, and I think that is what the 2008, you know, push to densify the CBD for housing is a very good reason to look at this very seriously and say, hey, look, we are not going to put the complete onus on the developer to make this disappear and not seem as if it doesn't even exist. We don't, you know, housing is invisible somehow. Like that, it's just with the cost of new construction now, and including the new, what is that called? Stretch code, where developers who are building these kinds of buildings have to abide by a very, very high sustainability standard that's gonna cost a whole lot. And we continue to stretch this out so that if these things don't get built, that makes the housing even that much more expensive. And any kind of affordability that is present in this project now will not be affordable later. So that's why I would also vote for, well, I mean, I made the motion to approve this, but I would vote no on the motion to deny.
Anyone else want to say something? Are we ready for a vote?
I think so.
Okay,
Yeah.
roll call vote. We'll just go around this way. Carrie?
I vote aye on the motion to deny.
Okay, Nick?
Aye.
Sally?
Aye.
Deb says no.
No.
Okay, the motion carries 3-2.
Now, with regards to voting thresholds, the 3-2 is not a sufficient threshold?
No, it is, because we're not, you need 4 for approval.
Oh, I see.
That's the threshold.
Thank you.
Okay.
So a
Then
decision gets written,
decision gets written.
and the question of the 2-year waiting period would be addressed at such time as the applicant would bring something to us, and we would determine whether it is substantially
If it has
different.
specific, what is the exact words? Specific and material changes.
Okay.
And that would be up to the board to decide
And
at
if
that
we were to
point.
determine that what he brought before us, having withdrawn his application and us having denied the application that he started with, that if he came back to us with something, our first task would be to determine if it's specific and material changes.
Mhm.
And if we do determine that it is, then we would reopen a public hearing to address his new application.
We would actually open the public hearing and then make that determination.
Okay,
So he
yeah.
would submit a application, we would open the public hearing. If it's within 2 years, same project, we would come to a decision as to whether he could proceed.
Right?
And
And if we determine not, then he can still tick-tock, the 2 years
two
is
years is,
clicking from today's vote.
yes,
Okay, so now I understand, thank you.
I'm pretty sure it's within today's vote.
Well,
That particular part of
Maybe
Mass
it's the
General
date of the
Law is
decision.
so confusingly written, because it actually says that you need 4/5. But in the case where it comes back to the board, and the board says that it is specific material,
Is that where you need 4/5?
that's where you need 4/5. But then it later says that you only need one person to object to that. And so when you go to, for instance, a SPGA which has more than 5 members, then you go to a 2/3 vote, but then one person can object to it. So it's very confusingly written. But luckily, we don't have to go into that confusion because we only have 5 members.
Okay,
So, and that is a river I think we'll cross when we get there.
there we go, that's right.
Okay. So I believe this concludes our hearing on 1016 Mount Vernon. Why don't we officially close it out? Is there a motion?
Motion to close the hearing on 1016 Mount Vernon.
Is there a
Second.
second? We have a second. Roll call vote.
Aye.
Oh,
We can all just.
we can all just raise our hands. Aye, yes. We don't have to do this. We're not on Zoom anymore.
Nancy, did you get that it was unanimous to close the vote? I mean, close the hearing?
Who seconded?
I did.
Okay. So
Wow, it's blank.
let us move on to our next item.
I can't see it.
Oh, is it, where'd it go?
Minutes.
Yeah, I don't
Is
know.
it,
The agenda?
it should be on that first
This one,
page.
right.
Why don't you close it? Maybe I opened and closed that. I put that disc in so many times.
Next at 8:15 are the meeting minutes.
Let's just get rid of this, close all tabs.
Continuation meeting minutes, okay, good.
And so let's go back to planning board. Okay, there we go. So we have meeting minutes.
We have 3 sets?
We have 3 sets. We have April 11th. Are there any, what is the word I'm looking for?
Comments, corrections, edits.
Thank you. Sorry, I got to bed very early this morning. Comments, corrections, edits.
I do on page 3 of this
Are we starting with April 11th?
Yes.
for ZBA petition 40 Foxcroft. Page 3,
I'm on page numeral, which, yes, I'm
40
on.
Foxcroft, in the bullet points at the bottom, it says, the design review committee notes that the house is too large for the narrow site. Ms. Dale concurred with all the DRC comments. And then the second one is the design of this new home was very similar to the design of the adjacent home. I believe that was my comment, but I also commented on that the site was similar to the site next to it.
Okay,
That's my change. I just wanted to add that. I
okay.
think that's significant.
Can you submit that to Nancy?
Yeah.
Okay. Any other,
Right, in item 6, which begins on page 3 and continues on to page 4.
Yep.
Under alphabetical letter C,
okay,
and it says that Mr. Chair Jarius presented the applicant's request for a waiver for no dead-end streets, providing a cul-de-sac instead. And it says that Ms. Dale questioned what standard is the applicant using for road width. Before Ms. Dale questioned, I thought that it was relevant to insert the words, the planning board having agreed that the benefit of allowing a cul-de-sac outweighs the environmental impacts of requiring one.
Did
Because
we
that was our reason.
right, had we stated it at that point?
I don't think so.
So in the run of the meeting, we want to make sure that comment was put in the right place.
I don't know how to
I
tell that.
believe we would have, when we came to our decision on that, we passed it. So it would have been at the end of this paragraph in our discussion. As
So
to
at the
why.
end of the paragraph, at the discussion.
Yeah, so we would follow right after here, Sally, if I were to.
Yeah,
It would be right before Ms. Scott moved to grant a waiver.
right. I was
Okay.
gonna put it one sentence earlier, but you can put it anywhere you want. I just thought it was important to incorporate into the minutes.
Well, I think it has to be in between the presentation of the request and the vote.
Correct.
Okay, so if we could put that in there, and if you could pass that to
I
Nancy.
will give to Nancy. And you want it to be inserted after the word ledge subdivision?
No, right before Ms. Scott.
Right before Ms. Scott, okay.
Because that would be the.
And Nancy, I will get that to you. Good, okay, and then the only other edits that I had, well, it's actually on page 5, this is minor, but page 5, bottom of the page, item number 2, end of the first line, conformed construction drawings show proposed streetlight concerned about dark sky compliance, not night sky. And that's all I had.
Which number was that?
It was on the bottom,
I'm looking at that, I'm just trying to.
oh, number 2, Mr. Manter.
Okay, number 2, dark sky, okay, yep,
Yeah, it's dark sky.
okay.
Good. And so that's all I had on the minutes for April 11, 2023.
So I move to approve minutes for April 11th, unless you guys have comments.
Second.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Oh, so much faster.
Yeah.
The technical issues took so much longer, but the
Yeah.
votes are quick. Okay, so let's move on to
We'll get the technical.
April 18th. Okay, any corrections or comments on April 18th?
I have an edit on pages 2 and 3.
Is it Scrivener's errors?
No, well, I don't know. It's all in, it's section 6, liaisons with other boards and committees. And with the accessory dwelling unit working group, I thought that I was not going to be on that. I don't know why I thought that. Maybe I misremembered.
I don't recall.
I thought
think
that
it's-
it was going to be I Ching.
Wait, what? I'm sorry.
It's in section 6, liaisons with other boards and committees.
Yeah, I thought I Ching wanted off of the ADU working group.
Oh, yeah, I did, yeah.
Did?
Mhm.
Okay, well, then I'll just stay on it then, so that settles that.
Okay,
And then with capital planning, I think you said that you would, like, to rotate that, was that the one you wanted to do a rotation? Oh, no, that was the master plan implementation
I
committee.
said that I would be more than happy to step off of capital planning, but no one raised their hand and said they wanted to, so I said I would continue to do so. But I really, it's,
Well, we could do some horse trading here.
the thing with capital planning is, once you start the cycle, you really need to stick through it.
Yeah, and you already started the cycle.
Not technically,
Trying to pass it
but
off.
it is important because the projects come in, they don't dribble in, but they come over multiple weeks where
Right,
there's
right.
presentations from all the departments. So you kind of want to be there all the way through
Well, I had it in my notes that I would tag team with you,
on,
capital planning.
well,
It is not a tag team kind of thing.
it's not a tag team kind of thing, but I appreciate the thought.
Okay.
And did you have any other comments?
No, oh, yes, the Conservation Commission, I was appointed the liaison to the Conservation Commission, and they always meet when we meet.
Yes, that
So
is,
I don't, but I can certainly,
So it's good for you too.
well, yeah, really.
it's an easy
Oh,
one.
I thought I took over as Concom.
That's
Oh, you did? Oh, that would be
But
great.
I said they would miss you, and it would be a painful separation. but
Yes.
I
That's
told
the-
I
David
believe
say
that's
So
that.
the
that was
case.
the tree working group.
No,
No,
that
Not
was
specifically
Concom.
Concom, I was
Oh.
speaking from the inside.
That's my excuse for,
Love you.
school committee
That's
too.
not-
They
They,
love me.
Oh, they love you.
Yes, I remember this.
So, I remember that comment now, because I don't need.
school committee.
I'm only clarifying, because I told David I had ousted you, and I felt bad about
So,
it.
we don't have to belabor it right now. I can stay as the liaison to the Concom, and what it would be good to do is for me to find out what services I can provide to them as a liaison who can never come to their meetings.
I was liaison to Concom for quite a while, and I don't think anyone knew,
Well,
because I did not do
I'm
very
kind of trying
much.
to keep
Well, the
tabs,
cat's out of the
so
bag now.
I think
Yeah.
they're, like, for example, like Waterfield and like Acera,
Oh,
we
yeah.
need to be,
Okay.
or it's gonna hold everything.
I'm on it. And then the only other edit I had was that the MBTA advisory group
Just TBD.
is TBD, I don't know. And then master plan implementation committee would be rotating between Jarius, Dale, and Layton.
That was, what we said.
Okay, good, then that's fine. And then the tree working group, I put Carrie.
Yeah.
Okay, good. That's all my edits.
Okay, well, are any of them actual edits?
Was that a mistake, the tree working group should have been?
I'm the tree working group.
Yeah, because I think the street tree committee and the tree working group are merging at some level, so.
Yep.
Yeah, so those are both.
Was that determined at that meeting, or is that being determined?
I think I took over all green spaces. I think I sort of like, there was sort of a sweeping, like, if
So-
it grows in the
If
dirt,
that was determined at that meeting.
I think
then
it was.
should have that it was Sally, the minutes can't change.
Yeah, I don't, we should, thank you, Nancy, that's a good point. If this is what we said, then that's what we said.
Well, okay, so.
no, I think we said at the meeting that I was the tree working group.
That's what I thought too.
I think at the meeting, we sort of, that's what I'm saying, at the meeting, I think we made the joke about, I'll take all the things that are
That
outside.
That you'll take all the things that are outdoors.
Exactly.
Okay, so,
For, this is a little bit of a discussion, but interim town planner, is there nothing that we need to vote on in order for you to post
there's
it?
nothing that we
Okay.
need to vote on.
Great.
So, any other
And then that was, I didn't have
corrections?
any other edits to the April 25th. Oh, and there is one edit. On page 3, item 6, continued discussion of chair / I want to insert spring town meeting, spring the word spring on number 6, just so we know what we were talking about that day.
Now, what did I just do?
That's all. And if it's no, and we don't, oh, no, I did have a much more substantive one on page 6, I'm sorry.
Okay, which? this
So
was-
top of page 6, first paragraph for MBTA section 3A, fourth sentence, fourth line, I mean.
Which page are you on?
Page 3,
Sorry, I
no, no,
moved
no.
this, I moved this.
yeah, page 3 of the April 25th minutes, top paragraph, fourth line down, the consultant has noted Winchester is required to, and I would substitute zone for instead of have. 1,220 units, semicolon, 610 units need to be zoned for.
I'm sorry, Sally.
Right here.
No, I'm at page 3 and I don't see what you see.
Wait, this is the minutes of April 25th.
Yeah, but we're not,
Yeah,
we
we're
haven't
not
voted,
there.
we're not there yet.
Oh, we're on the April 18th minutes.
Yes, we're still on April 18th.
Well, no wonder I'm giving you all kinds of.
Okay, so
problems.
any
My
other
apologies.
comments on the April 18th?
No others.
Okay, so can we move?
I'm really sorry.
Can we have a motion for approval as amended?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Now we can move on to April the 25th.
Let's jump the gun here, yes. And on April 25th, at the top of page 3, I wanted to insert the words zone for in the fourth line, where it would read, Winchester is required to zone for 1,220 units, semicolon, 610 units need to be zoned for within a half mile of the station.
I think that is fine.
Because we don't say that we have to build them, we say we have to zone for them. That's the law.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I think-
And then the only other thing is lower down on the page, under item 6, I just recommended inserting the word spring before town at meeting articles.
Okay,
And that's all I had.
any other edits? Can I get a motion to approve as amended?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, excellent. Okay,
Yeehaw.
we're done with that. I think that's all 3 of them, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then let us, why did I do that? That was silly of me. I wanted to go to your presentation when I should have.
Well, we
gone
want to talk about the MBTA consultant process.
So have we spent all the money? Like, let's spend all the money for this year so that we can prove that we used all of our money.
Okay, so the MBTA 3A consultant process, the money doesn't come from us, it comes from the state. So, there was I asked of Jen Goldson, who, it's her firm that's doing the work for us, on behalf of us, for this, paid by the state. And she said to complete the process would cost about $3,000 some and change. So, we have that money if we wanted to pursue it that way. I think that the other option is, as I sent an email to the board a while, maybe a week ago, is that there is the opportunity for more funding from the state to handle MBTA 3A issues. I don't know the entire context of what we can use that money for, but the due date is like 2nd or 3rd of June, so it's very, very,
That's like a week away, less than a week away.
it's upon us. And I asked for if anyone was interested in helping, I got crickets. I don't know that I have the bandwidth to ask for that money, to write that grant. So we are either faced with taking the money out of our bank account to continue, or, and I don't know, to be honest, I really don't know if the $3,000 quote that we were given, I don't know how accurate it is, in part because I don't have a good feeling for how much money the state allotted for our consultant to do what they did. I did ask for a breakdown of the work they had done, and it was a fairly general breakdown. It wasn't in terms of hours, it was in terms of activities,
Tasks, yeah.
tasks. So it was hard for me to get an idea of what would that mean? How much more would we need? I think we have, we're almost to the point, I think we will get a map that actually reflects some of the board's priorities. We have a number of, they ran a number of models, and the problem is that they were, because of the way they were
I'm
run.
eager to find out what the board's priorities were.
Well, no, what the board's priorities were, essentially, well, I should have.
Given that we haven't,
Yeah, and I said that completely wrong, and I apologize, Nick. So we had, at the outset, we were told we would get 3 models. One of the models was essentially based upon all of the CBD being used as zoned by right multifamily. So that's the base, everything's in the big pot, right? The next step was to understand how much of, so there is an ability to take in other lots which are further away from downtown, as long as they are more than 5 acres in extent. You can't gerrymander your way out of this, and that's the key thing. That's why it's been very difficult to get a map, because they have to enter all the GIS coordinates for the areas, and they do them, it's not like they say, okay, here, we're done, here's a map. They add things. So
we have to spend the 3,000 before we get that.
I think we will get a map out of this.
I'm just saying, because we
Yeah.
might want to get an understanding of what the moving parts are and what we can talk about and what we can negotiate on before we spend the last 3,000.
I agree. And I think that we will be making, it's become really apparent in the process that our next planner, interim or not, will become very familiar with how to generate these models so that we will be able to tweak. So one of the things that has come out was that some of the original ideas of what was possible to subtract from the land mass was something we didn't understand. So for instance, we found out that we could, for instance, use Parkview. It's an existing, it's greater than 5 acres, so we can count it, and that eased some of the pressure off of downtown. We have always been able to put in, we always have had enough density and enough units. Our underlying zoning already gives us that in terms of, so it's not like we say, if we switch things to multifamily by right, we're going to see enormous skyscrapers in order to meet the density. We don't have to do that. But the problem was getting the acreage required. So the ability of say, taking Parkhurst and saying, okay, we can use that now as
Not
acreage.
Parkhurst, Parkview.
Parkview, sorry, not Parkhurst, no, we're gonna get in trouble.
It's being used for things different now.
So we can use Parkview
Avalanche.
as part of it. And then you can, park land can be used to make areas contiguous even though you don't actually develop on it. Yes.
Including,
Little park.
public safety building, including
yes.
church.
Oh, I thought we couldn't use the public we didn't use. the
Well,
public
it turns out that you can add it in and then take it out.
You add it in because
Oh.
it gets you contiguous, but then you take it out because you're not gonna build housing
So
in your public safety
one of
building.
the original ideas
Overnight
was,
housing.
so there's housing up on Lake Street. There is actually housing authority housing, and there's the Wedge Pond condos, both of which provide the density of units per acre that are appropriate. But we didn't think we could use those because they are not connected to downtown. But if we take the town land that wraps around Wedge Pond and comes down to the Wedgewood condos,
It's a bridge, it
it's
connects.
a bridge. So all of these technical issues make it really, it's confusing to be able to come to the board and say, okay, here's a map that works, because all of us, we learned as this process went on and as the consultants started working that there were these other ways of accommodating So
Okay, so it sounds like they made good progress and they are.
they made
building
good
it now.
progress, and we discovered ways of, there were some areas in the CBD which Sally and I were, so the other problem is, if we have more people go to these meetings, they have to turn into public meetings because of the open meeting law. And so that means, this is a bunch of consultants, technical consultants. So opening that up to a public hearing would really,
But when will they present to it? I mean, they will.
we are going to have, I believe we're going to have a final product. So we have essentially 3 models that have been run, one of which is the original one that I think Brian came up with, and they added some of the GBD2 to give us essentially everything counts. Then we'll have one which you provided some input on in terms of trying to minimize the impact, to retain first floor commercial by right. And then this latest one was when all of a sudden we discovered we could add in things like the public safety building, the congregational church, no, not the congregational church, the big one in the
The
middle of the town.
Congregational Church.
That's the congregational church? Okay, the one with the town's clock is in that building, believe it or not. But,
Like that one, like across the street.
that's the one over by the bank,
It's on the, it faces the common.
yeah, it faces the common.
Okay.
And we can use the common. So the idea is to create contiguity, and sometimes you can, the rules are arcane. But anyway, so that last map it takes out the public safety building, it takes out a couple other buildings.
Oh, it doesn't even need the public safety?
We put it in there because what it does is it provides us flexibility.
It provides us acreage.
It provides us acreage. And so then those come back to the board. And then we have these 3 scenarios we can look at, which is essentially the broadest to perhaps the most narrow. And then we can make policy decisions on how we proceed. So for instance, some towns have handled preservation of first floor commercial by allowing them to be multifamily by right, but providing incentives to create commercial on the first floor. But we don't have to do that. I mean, we could if we wanted, it depends upon how much we want to push to get, those are the balancings. But we have these scenarios which should provide us the parameters, space that we can work with.
We'll be able to look at those maps and see, which are the historic buildings and which are the non-historic ones.
I think we have, most of the historic buildings, I believe, are out.
Check out everything. That was
I think so.
But that would be put in front of us as
But
part
it
of
would be
this.
put in front of us. It would be we could make that policy decision. We have the elbow room to go in and make those policy decisions and say, these properties are important. The only thing we can't do, again, is it has to be contiguous. It cannot be gerrymandered because they don't want you to, it's not, you can't do spot unzoning or whatever.
Yeah.
But we are able to do Park View, even though it's
We're
not,
counting.
More
it's
than
not
5
attached, because
Because
it's 5
large.
acres.
That's
Because it's
right.
greater than 5 acres. It's actually 8 acres, I believe, or 7 point some.
Yeah,
Yeah, and there aren't too many, so we looked at, one of the things that was looked at were the 240Bs, but those are all too small in terms of the area. They're all, I think, an acre or a little over.
yeah, the
an acre.
land mass is too
The
small.
land mass is too
right.
small. So the key is that we have elbow room, we can tweak. We have policy decisions that we can make, and I think this allows us to work within that. There are some towns which do not have this flexibility. And so, we did give them a last map, I think was it last week? I can't remember. We worked on
Life's a blur, don't know.
Yeah, Sally and I worked on a revision. We gave
We
it to
like
them
my-
last week.
That's the story.
And so one of the things that we will have to make a decision on quickly is, do we want to go for grant money from the state to pursue?
So my answer to that question is, how onerous is the application?
I have no idea. I
Because
have
it's due June what? Oh.
3rd or something.
Oh, that's real.
I don't know how onerous the application is.
Well, what about if I have a look at the application, I try to fill it out, I try to get help, and if I can't get it in on time, then we'll take it out of our budget. But knowing how hard we worked for our budget, I'd like to preserve it for the purposes at hand.
I would as well. I mean, we have money in our budget for outreach, but we don't have money, we specifically line item that, we get like 5,000 for outreach. We do not have money in our budget for more technical assistance on
Right.
this. And
So
I think
this
we
is the
will need to-
MAPC Technical Assistance Grant that's due June 3rd, is that correct?
It's, yeah, so the money, again, I think it's one of these things, and I'm not sure of the details. Originally, it was you applied for, we didn't get the money went to MHP, who paid it out to the consultant.
Right, that's
And
right.
it may be that same sort of thing.
Yeah,
And I know that we've had some issues with this consultant, because I think there was a mismatch between what I think we thought we were going to get and what
Yes.
they thought they were gonna provide. And I think that mismatch may have been because the contract was not with us, it was between the state and the consultant. And so there was a verbal description, and I reached out to our former town planner, Brian Zucchelli, and I asked him what his impression was. And he recalls that it was a fairly vague sort of a statement at the beginning. And again, because it wasn't a formal scope of work between us and the consultant, you can't say, hey, you didn't do this. So I know, I do have 2 emails from last week, which I have not yet read, concerning MBTA and I will have to get to that
so
as soon as possible.
I would like to leave it, so June 3rd is a Saturday, so it's surely not due on a Saturday. It's probably due on a Friday, do you think?
If you can dig out that email where I said, help, then maybe,
And next week is a shortened week. Monday is a holiday.
Oh, right.
so
I offer this to Dia, and I can, but I didn't do it. I could reach out to Housing Partnership and see if anybody is interested in helping you with this grant.
thank you.
That would be
for-
nice, that would be really nice.
I completely forgot we had this
I
discussion.
mean, it's
Ching, I'm
sitting
sorry.
down with the grant application and reading it and understanding what they're asking for, and then finding out if there's any chance that I can get what they're asking for by the deadline. And it's also figuring out what the deadline is it June 2nd, or is it June whatever?
Yeah.
So, I'll find the email, Diab, I was just about to search for it.
Yeah.
From Diab,
This is for the,
and, stupid,
It was, yeah, everyone, you know, so there's a monthly or bi-weekly,
well, that was another question I had for you, but let me just get this one first.
let's see, what are we doing on time? I'm sorry, I wanted
It's
8:35.
not
Oh,
quite a
shoot,
bit.
we're way beyond.
Yes, we are.
Okay, so let's move to North Main Street. I think we can do, everyone's aware that we have this deadline coming up, it's in the email.
Yeah, but let's find out what it is, let's read the application, let's find out if someone from Housing Partnership Board might be willing to help us,
Okay.
and let's see if we can just scramble. And then in the meantime, can you click on the bottom of the screen on the P for PowerPoint?
We have to get it back up.
Uh-oh.
Oh, I can tell you the password.
Yeah, it's,
Oh, actually,
did they change it? No.
no, but I
You
think
should say
Dane knows the password.
It's already done.
Oh, it already worked,
Yeah,
okay.
because I know what the
See
password
the
is.
P at the bottom?
Yep.
P for PowerPoint? So, as I said when I sent this out to you, I'll go fast.
Okay, so why don't you, why don't you run this, Sally?
Okay, great, I'd be happy to, thank you.
I think
So,
a
I
right
took these,
click might
this is a
work.
discussion about the North Main Street stuff, and I put it in 3 parts, and I had to remind myself what they are. First, we're gonna just do a quick underlying vision, goals, and strategies from all these sources, the master plan, MAPC studies, and form in place as methodology. So I'm gonna go through that right now, really fast. Let's see, how do you just
Maybe,
advance? Oh, I see, there's a cute little arrow. Fine. So Form in Place asked us to get back to them with some guidance and direction. And I called Michael Wang and I asked him what specifically, and he said these 3 questions. What needs are we seeking to address? What zoning bylaw changes are we bringing to April 24 Springtown meeting? And what key factors are incorporated into our choices? And I think the only question that we can answer right now, because it's because we haven't had time to figure it out, is that we have corridor goals and housing goals. And the corridor goals off the top of my head were to increase the safety, improve the streetscape, and growth in commercial nodes, and, which is a word I made up, so. And then housing goals is to increase the style and quantity of units, and to be compliant, use the section of this corridor up to Clark Street, as part of our MBT 3A compliance. So that's what, our goals are. And then quickly, master plan goals and strategies regarding evolving opportunity areas and the North Main Street corridor. Encourage development that supports vibrancy, including the identified evolving opportunities area. North Main Street was identified as one, and the purpose there was to create an area plan to envision public realm improvements, identify development opportunities and zoning amendments and design guidelines, which I know that's part of our plan. And it made some specific observations in the master plan about the two districts. Sorry, go back. On GBD 3, which is the upper end of North Main Street, opportunities for contextual infill and redevelopment, coupled with streetscape and safety, okay? And then for GBD 2, and I was surprised that they were different, but they are, to present redevelopment and public investment opportunities, to promote all those things that we want so much for North Main Street. So that said, the master plan goals specifically were that we would drive from a vision of created by a community-led process. We would focus on physical improvements, robust commercial and job space, increasing visitation, increasing housing choice, less restrictive zoning, and design guidelines. Okay, so that's all background information. And then further, the MAPC, when they did all of their studies for us, they came up with these pieces of data with regards to North Main Street. GBD 3 is greater acres, but fewer parcels, and the consequence of that is that the lots in GBD 3 are, on average, are larger than the lots in GBD 2. The thing that it doesn't speak to in this slide is that depending on where you are, on the east or the west side, and whether you're in GBD 3 or GBD 2, many of these sites back up to what I would call sensitive neighborhood areas. And I believe that they were called in the zoning, in the master plan, something like preservation zones or something like that. I'm not historic preservation, but preserving quality of life. So that's a really big one to know. And this slide is somewhat guidance for our selecting of identifying the parcels and so on, because it talks about the MAPC's analysis of lots that are likely to change in the near term, long term, or very unlikely. And I would have to know more about each of those lots and what their metrics were, but I'm putting it up there to say it's relevant for us to talk about when we're talking about focusing on parcels, okay? So, and then the preservation areas, this is what it was. They were called preservation areas. And Canal Street and Richardson subdivision is identified as one of the preservation areas, a historic residential neighborhood with a wealth of irreplaceable properties, and they call for stronger preservation protections and enhancements with sensitive infill. So it's very relevant. Oh, and maybe I did put it in. Maybe I skipped it. No, here it is. So MAPC gave us the purple boxes with all of the historic properties. One, red, which fronts on Main, but it's actually addressed on Russell, is actually in the National Register of Historic Places. The rest have been deemed historic in Macris. And in case anybody likes to read fine print, there's all the properties. And we should be mindful, as we're doing our work, that we have section 4.5 recently passed, which allows for a waiver of dimensional controls to preserve existing natural and historic resources if we give flexible zoning, if people commit to put a preservation easement on a historic building. So there's a process for that. But if you're curious how I come up with this list, it was just, I put everything from 724 Main Street up, and then I also, it automatically volunteered 43, 44, and 45, which are the Russell Road properties, which abut Main Street. So I was happy that it did that. But there are 45 historic structures in the North Main Street in Macris, and some of them are within the theoretical development parcels. I did not have time to highlight them when I made this PowerPoint. But this is what Form in Place told us that we're doing. We're creating a framework that incentivizes development, right? Including the mix of units and character and siting and scale. And the framework is the zoning, okay? And our purpose in doing that is, well, no, that's the zoning, and then there's also the streetscape improvements, and then there's also complete streets. And those are three parallel, essential pieces of the work that we have in front of us, I have come to understand. So then I said we would dive into the theoretical parcels that they came up with. And this is really complicated, and I encourage you to turn to the second to last page of your packet, third to last page of your packet. It looks like this, because I got really confused, and I said, no one is not going to be confused without this piece of paper in front of them. So in GBD 3, Form in Place identified 7 theoretical development parcels, and unfortunately they changed their numbering from time to time, so I kind of cleaned it up. But the parcels fall on the east side of North Main Street and on the west side of North Main Street. And as I said, the analysis that we do will really count on us being sensitive to which side of the street we're talking about. But just to give you familiarity with the names, there's parcel A2, B2, and B6 on the east side, and the test will be at 9:30 tonight. And then no, I'm joking. On the west side, there's parcel A4, B1, B3, and B5, okay? And I put some street markers there, but please, it's extremely confusing. So then, they also identified 3 east side GBD3 parcels, in addition to, oh yeah, because they're numbered, they're in section C, which you're not seeing here yet, which goes down to Swanton. There's a portion of their zone 3C, whatever. So these are the parcels that are in the 3 east side development pieces that are south of Cross, okay? Oh no, they would be south of Cross because that's the borderline, but they're all above Swanton, okay? So one's along Main and Cross, one's along Main between Hill and Russell, and one's on the corner of Swanton and Main, which we're all familiar with. So, and these are theoretical development parcels that are done by the consultant based on their experience identifying potential aggregations of land. I don't know how they did this, but I just put that out there. And then parcel A4 on the west side of GBD3 is a parcel that's north of Glenwood. There's one between Glenwood and Hemingway. There's one south of Hemingway and between Canal and Water. The only reason I can rattle off these names is A, because I put them on the screen, and B, because I've been diving into this for 2 weeks to understand it. Okay, but I don't expect this to be lucid in the moment that we're in. But they did identify 9 GBD2 parcels that are theoretical development parcels, and 6 of them, I'm over here on the right and I see my things got squished up together, are south of Clark. So they're within a half mile. So if we're going to focus on anything really important, it's going to be understanding the different scenarios that were put to us by Form in Place, particularly for these 6 parcels of land that are south of Clark. And in addition, in GBD2, there's these 3 parcels that are north of Clark. And I think I mentioned them earlier, and that was confusing. Turns out there's a test fit software that they used. I found this. It's a very cool piece of software. It's very powerful for people who are exploring real estate development. It explores scenarios for building form, density, parking, setbacks, open space, and more. I just extracted that from their website, and I encourage you to go to the test fit. It really is a software product page, so I don't know how helpful, but for instance, if we start in the upper.
That's the brand name, Test Fit.
Test fit, all one word.
Wow.
So I thought it was cool. Maybe they're using that, maybe they're not. I just found that. But so if we start at the top of Main Street, on the northbound side, the west side, they have identified a lot, and I don't even want to go into what's there now. Okay, they just identified it, and they gave us these data points. They proposed that we do a mixed-use commercial and retail building there, that it would front on Main Street by this percentage with setbacks of this amount, which would create a 6 to 20-foot sidewalk. They came up with parking ratios, fully parked, and they came up with a 42 to 45-foot height limit. The building that's there now is 1 story. This is also the building that people who live in this, can't do that. This is a townhouse community that Winchester created.
Wait, this is the east side of Main Street? What's there now?
A long, low, flat building.
The Winchester Hospital owns that building right now.
Okay,
This is
I know exactly which
1022
one it
Main.
is. Okay,
Yeah,
great.
okay. So they came up with that scenario. I just want to familiarize yourself with the data points. They've given us the boundaries of the parcel, they've given us the square footage, the number of acres, they've talked about what the uses would be, they talked about how much frontage there would be, setbacks, parking, and height. Okay, so they did this for all these parcels. And if you want to know just how helpful I can be, I put it all in a spreadsheet, and it's the second to last page of your
Love the
packet.
spreadsheet, Sally, this is magical.
Okay, so I'm gonna start going really fast now, because what we're gonna be, and I'm gonna tell you first, what we have to figure out is use this information, ask questions of Michael and John, and decide what we wanna decide about height and density and setback and everything. But they gave us a ton of information to go from. So they did, for GBD3 East, they did 2 test fits for parcel 2. One, this is the big 955 Main Street
Oh, right.
condo.
Oh,
building.
yeah, that's.
So this would be categorized as extremely unlikely to change.
Yep.
But what they did say was we could consider, and obviously there's steps you go to, but we could either add these 6 townhouses as Hill Street liner, or these 8 piece houses and smaller as a liner. And that's a way of getting housing onto that parcel without having anything change. They did 2 more test fits for that same parcel where they said, well, this is a long-range zoning thing, and change happens over time. And just because we zone for something doesn't mean that someone's going to come in with a bulldozer and tear down a building. 40 years from now, the age of that building might have been, the amortized age, or whatever. They said these are alternatives if there was no Winchester Hospital building, and you can see the dashed line where the building is. You see that there? You would do all of this. One of them is 72 units. One of them is 92 units. You can see that the dwelling units per acre density jumps from 22 to 28. One of them, they came up with parking numbers. One thing I should note is what they said here is this would impact available parking for the office building.
Yeah.
Right?
Which is tight. I mean, that
Right.
building is so
Right,
utilized.
so I'm not saying that we're advising that we're gonna tear down the building or anything. This is just what they did with their test fit,
It's interesting.
okay? So that's the second parcel that they looked at for us, and I think there's like 20. This is where the pizza place and the physical therapist and my dentist are.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone knows my dentist.
Oh, right.
There's Swanton, there's
Andrew's
Water,
Pizza.
there's Bellino
Right.
Park, and they came up,
Childcare around the corner too.
what's that?
Yeah.
Childcare on the other part of the dentist down at the lower level.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. And this apparently they swept into the parcel. And again, I don't know their logic for aggregation.
That's a commercial building right there.
Okay, so they said it's 88% on North Main, fully parked. it would be calculating the average ground plane would make 3 floors challenging with a 1-level drop-off in the rear, which I never knew about. So, at any rate, this is one where they said, okay, this is a potential thing, and they've got mixed use, residential, details are here, right? So, but this is really hard to look at alone. So I did the deep dive to give you sheets and A's. So another one is in the middle of GBD3, and it's on the west side. This pointed thing right here, I think, is this is Hemingway Street. But they came up with a thing where there would be 20 units with sufficient parking and access off of Hemingway only, and no curb cuts on Main. Could add an entry off North Main and change to a one-way loop, right? Oh, and in fact, I think that parcel 3, I thought I saw that, but maybe not.
I think we discussed it possibly.
Yeah.
We talked about how traffic on Hemingway is difficult.
Okay, so all of these have to be weighed against further information that maybe wasn't factored into this, blue sky exercise. This is the building, the lot, it's really big, it's 1.25 acres. I think it's the lot that has the Verizon building on it.
The Verizon is in the lower portion, and then as you go further up North Main, it's a couple more lots, so yeah.
Right, so there's definitely some aggregation of other land.
The Verizon lot is really deep as well, so.
Right, and they said that somewhere. And so they came up with a scenario, 42 dwelling units per acre, 53 residential units, right? And so this is what we have to understand about density. We have to understand that when we say 42, what do we mean? What does it look like? And what I didn't put into this presentation is all of the fabulous illustrations that they gave us, and also all the second floor footprints or upper floor footprints, because I didn't have time, I didn't have space. They did an amazing thing with their test fits. But we can go back when we get closer. If you're looking at it, at least on the screen, when we're talking about actual zoning for actual portions of the street, which is a huge job, and we have to get it ready for springtime meeting. No pressure, just get it done. And then this is another one on the west side where they came up with a density of 14 dwelling units per acre, 12 residential units, and setbacks and parking ratios and so on. So just like I said, I was going to go through these really quickly. They came up with 3 test fits for this one parcel, and where you would do 2 4-unit buildings or 3 4-unit buildings. Both of those would be mixed use, or 10 townhouses. I didn't have the density calculations on these slides, but 16 units, 12 units, 16 units, with commercial, without commercial. These are things for us to consider, and I would recommend that you just get on your walking shoes with this in hand and think about what it means. And have also maybe the information on height, because I put number of floors in here. What's not clear to me is 3.5. Flat roofed, 4 flat roofed, 3.5. We haven't talked about that yet, but this is what they were pushing to get to the numbers in the test fit software, as I understand it. So here's another parcel with 3 choices.
Sally,
Yeah.
can I point
Yeah.
out one thing? Can you go back one slide?
Yes,
I think
I
it's an
can.
important part of their design.
Yes.
One of the things they did is they made sure that they used the parking or the roadway as a buffer to the residential neighbors behind there.
Yeah, that's nice.
So they've moved the housing outwards, and so in a sense you'd say, well, you could put in, you could extend the housing back and get more units, but what they've done is they've really tried to buffer the back
Right,
end.
right.
And you'll see this, I think we're getting to, this is the town.
That's the DPW
That's a
land right
DPW
there.
land, but you'll see as it goes down on GBD 2 towards town center where there aren't residential neighborhoods backing those properties, they can
Right.
go all the way to the back.
And in their slides that they presented to us, they did not crop these so closely, but I wanted them to be legible on the screen, so I cropped, fluffy
Mhm.
trees out. But in the slides, which are in all of our emails and stuff. So here's test fits for partial 4, 2 mixed-use buildings, 2 residential multifamily, 2 multifamily residential. Let's see, this one is above retail. This one was 88 units, this is 110 units, this is 148 units, and this is in GBD 2 East. and it's parcel 4, and if I'm not mistaken, parcel 4 is below Clark. I have to go back to my,
Yes,
okay, so
Pretty
this
sure
is
so.
one for us to pay close attention to, right? In terms of zoning, we are zoning for this. We're not designing it and we're not building it. We're zoning for it and creating design guidelines. And they did the same thing for parcel 5. They came up with one that's 42 units plus retail. They came up with 42 units plus less retail. I guess because, I don't know why. I don't know. I'd have to.
You mentioned below Clark because.
Because that's 1/2 mile.
Right,
from
that's
us.
the 3/8 threshold.
That's the 3, I'm sorry, what?
Yeah.
Yeah, right, and so then they came up with, and these are separate buildings, right?
Yeah, the other thing about Clark is really, south of Clark, you don't have to worry about residential behind them.
Right,
It really, there's a dramatic change as you go
yeah,
north of
right,
Clark.
because the DPW land is there.
Mhm.
Right.
And they won't feel as impacted. I'm making a bold statement there.
Hmm.
But you can see that where it says, required was 23 plus 7, and they're providing 30. Required is 36 plus 8, and they're providing 47. Required parking is 32 plus 8, and they're providing 46. Their parking scenarios have met all, well, they mentioned, they made reference to a modified parking ratio that we can talk about sometime when we get to it. And then they came up with a test fit down for where the triangle land is by the ball field. And they expanded the site footprint and created a pocket park and so on. That pocket park, it's a very tiny piece of property. But on the west side of GBD 3, these are those 3 parcels that are confusing to me. So, but you can see townhouses and commercial retail. I think that it would have been helpful if I put the upper story here because the first floor retail. And then over here you can see townhouses, and this is Salem and Clark. So yeah, these are all above Clark.
Yeah,
And you know, again, this is a 40-year horizon of buildings aging out.
Water Street lines up with Swanton.
Right, lines up with Swanton, that's exactly right. And again, another exercise that I didn't do was to take every one of these scenarios and put the blue or the colored circle around historic buildings. I worked on this for 2 weeks and I didn't get all these other steps done.
This is amazing.
This is
So
great
for
stuff.
parcel 3, they came up with 3 concepts, and parcel 3 is where it is. They came up with 2 4-unit buildings plus mixed use, 3 4-unit buildings, 10 townhouses. One of them is 16 units, one's 12, one's 16. So again, they said, and also all of their test fitting was done before the 3A said, make first floor residential as of right. So that changes the merits of some of their proposals, right? So there's that. And then here's a test fit for parcel 2, wherever the heck that is. You have to look. Oh, this is right next to Blake Street. This is the funeral home. That's what this is.
Oh, Lane.
And I think there's already a building there that was just built, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, it was. So they just came up with a scenario for that, which, again, at some point in the future, whatever. So here's the building that's right next to the historic building, and this backs up to the DPW. And they came up with 2 scenarios, mixed use retail above, 8 units versus 23 units. I don't know how they did that. I have to look more at their second and third floors, which I didn't paste in here, and their pictures, which I didn't paste in here.
This site has a drop off in the back, so.
Oh, yes, and I believe that, you see this wedge right here? It goes to a little point,
Mhm.
and there's a line that runs around. This would be them acquiring land from the town and building a massive retaining wall.
Mhm.
Oh, I
Okay,
see.
so, you know, it's not for us to decide what's feasible and developable. This is what's called feasibility.
Right.
But feasibility also includes finances. And so what they did is they came up with some cross to Clark. and Clark to Skilling's scenario yields. And if we did the maximum and the minimum for all the scenarios that they showed us, within the MBTA, the maximum number of dwelling units that they modeled was allowed, it was 255. And within the MBTA 3A 1/2 acre, we have to come up with 610 zoned for. And we may already be there.
We're there, we are
Okay, we're
definitely
there.
there.
So
We
we
don't
don't-
have to worry about units.
Yeah, I mean, a 4-story, does the town have 4-story buildings? That seems
Sure,
very
yeah.
high, I mean,
Well,
but not
Parkview
many.
is what, 7?
Yeah, but it's,
And actually, the
Parkview.
building at the top of Elmwood is more than 4 stories. It's that old apartment building that looks down onto or next to the Congregational Church. So there's some precedent, but not many.
right.
There, certainly on that side of, there are some parts of North Main where if it's set back, these are the larger parcels. I don't know how big Winchester Savings Bank is. It always strikes me as being 4 stories tall.
It is
tall.
really
It's
large.
pretty big. But it's that side of the road, those are deep lots, they can have setbacks, so.
Yeah, if there's
There's
setback.
a-
I'm just looking at how they're placing everything sort of with like no setback from the sidewalk and
Well,
picturing
so-
it becoming sort of a column that you drive
Well,
down.
no, but a big part of that was to get the parking behind the buildings and.
No,
to-
I totally appreciate that, but 4-story seems high.
Oh, yes,
There
right.
are, so
Here.
in one of the earlier presentations, they showed sort of a cross-section across the street
Mm-hmm.
and how you define the streetscape, but then you peel it back so it doesn't turn into a canyon. But
Okay,
the idea is if you put things near the street, you can define it as a corridor.
and I like that, I mean, especially if they're first floor commercial and they're coffee, like the gathering places, like, I love
And
it,
you'll
that's
see
great,
some
right on the
parcels
sidewalk
where they
with a
set the building
buffer.
back like 10 feet, 5 feet, 15 feet, because they wanted to widen the sidewalk, because they wanted to encourage tables and people gathering and
Yeah,
vitality.
right, and I mean, it's so hard when they do put things there, it's so hard to sort of get a
And
nice
again,
flow to that area.
They have
This
given
is
us so
gonna
many
be great.
different approaches.
Well,
Yeah.
they've given us a lot of approaches, and they've given us a lot of information.
Mhm.
And so I just want to take 1 second right now to go to the spreadsheet. I mean, you can see that there was some things I couldn't fill in, and Michael and John can help me. But when you look down the
Which
column,
spreadsheet? The,
it's the second
Yes.
to last
Mhm.
page of the packet. It wasn't in the slideshow. So the very last column says square feet of commercial retail.
Yep.
And you can see that there's places on here where some of the numbers are really big. Parcel A2, 59,000.
Is that 955?
Parcel 2, south of Clark, 16,000. Parcel 1, south of Clark, 25,000. And even GBD 2, east side, there's all this commercial too. And because the 3A is asking towns to have as much as of right first floor residential as possible in multifamily buildings, these numbers might change. I also have a very unclear understanding of what the existing commercial community in Winchester would like to see. And so I left a message for Richard Leaf about that, but he's been busy, as I thought. But the other column to pay attention to is the number of floors and the number of units. And the ones that are in the gray bars, those are the 3 ones that had multiple scenarios. So you can't just add up the column.
Right.
But I think that's where they came up with, remember they did that yield slide? So we can check their numbers, and also, I am sure this is rife with mistakes, because every time I went through it, I found another one. And I stopped doing that at 3 o'clock today, because I
So,
couldn't do it.
It's
The
okay,
other thing I wanna
it's
call
great.
This is
to our-
really, really amazing work.
I
Yeah,
want to call to our attention also, let me just, and then Diab, I turn it over to you. This is a page that is from one of their 2 PowerPoints that they've given us. And it is the coolest checklist of zoning and design guidelines. It's a framework. It just rocks. So I
that's
made
great.
sure we all got another copy. And thus concludeth my whirlwind.
Thank you, Sally.
Thank
That's
you,
great.
Sally.
It's really helpful.
That was a
Yes.
whirlwind.
Yeah.
Did you get that?
Yeah, it's a lot to digest.
Oh.
2 weeks of your work and
You can, I have one of them.
one PowerPoint.
Oh,
This one can be for you.
so I want to, again, thank you. This is an amazing amount of work, Sally.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it brings us back to these three questions that you posed right at the beginning.
Yep.
And it also brings us back to the fact that we have approximately $7,000 left in our contract with Foreman Place this fiscal
Oh.
year.
Oh, oh,
And
good.
this fiscal year ends July 31st, so we have
That's June
only a few
31st.
weeks.
Oh.
And they said, you know, we've done everything you've asked us so far. What do we do next? And we-
Exactly why I made this PowerPoint.
And that's what we're here is they need to know what to do because they're sitting waiting for us to say, here's the next step.
And what's the boundary of do they do community engagement? Do they do maps? What are they,
Well, they're
obviously
gonna
they do
help
maps.
us, they're gonna help us write the zoning guidelines.
Okay.
The zoning, they're gonna help us identify, you know, changes and inclusions in the zoning code. And they're gonna help us come up with form-based code as much as we can, okay? I don't know that they do, well, they must do community.
I don't know if that's their forte. I think they really are sort of the stuff that we've seen them do.
I mean, this is, to the beginning of your PowerPoint, this is a high-density area, so we need
Yeah.
we need the neighborhood engaged
So-
early.
We do indeed, and
Yeah, so I think I think we need to separate out what they'll be doing for us beginning next fiscal year.
Right.
We have 30K for them to take us to April 20.
no, to the end of the fiscal year.
We have 7K to the end of the fiscal
Oh,
year.
yes, and then,
And then the next fiscal year, we've got 30K for them to take us to the finish line at Springtown meeting.
right, exactly.
Okay, so if we
So-
look at this
And TikTok
checklist.
on Springtown meeting.
Yes, but TikTok on 7K before June 31st.
Yes. So, you know I made that one call to Michael,
Yes.
to ask him, and it was like a 10-minute call, to find out what do they need from us to keep the ball rolling? And that's what this was, okay? But
Yeah,
now, what we need from them is to help us take the incredible amount of information that they gave us and understand how to apply it to, or to put it through our opinions or our views or our preferences or our wishes and the community input and the preservation of historic structures. And how do we do that?
so there's one bureaucratic thing is that we have to look at what our contract with them says that we ask them to do for 30K or however much we are going to pay them this year.
Okay, well, we can
And,
look at that.
and see whether that scope is part of it.
I probably have it on my Mac.
Yeah, I don't,
It's 9:30.
yeah,
Yeah.
the problem is that we need to make a decision quickly to tell them what to do in the next 6 weeks. So that is,
Well, so Diab, next time
It's
that you
not
and I
even 6
sit
weeks.
down to come up with agenda stuff, which we do on Fridays, can we come up with something to say to them?
well, I think this board has to come up with something to say to them.
Okay,
It's-
good.
I think this is where the board says, you know, here's what you get to do for the next, and I said 6 weeks, and it's not really 6 weeks, because it's the 23rd. So I think
So,
there's a, you know,
so I'm looking at their checklist. That might be a helpful slide to look at.
yeah,
Um,
I don't know that,
Like, we want to draw off we want the town to have sort of a cohesive look and, right, each distinct neighborhood should still have some cohesion, so if they can help us draw guidelines out of the center business district, that would be useful for North Main corridor, or no, I'm throwing stuff out here, again, I'm like,
Yeah.
so
For
person.
cohesion, it's the balance between cohesion and,
We want it to be a distinct
honoring-
neighborhood, but we still want, what are some principles of the center business district that we could use as guidelines, so that there's some sense you're still in Winchester?
well, so the really big ones, to me, are setback,
Which we're
well, the
immediately
underside.
violating.
But, I mean, every one of these is huge.
But I think there's, I think the thing that I'm worried about is, it's not the center business district.
No, I know, but
Yeah.
are there elements, that's what I mean, if they
Yeah,
can
I
sort of
mean-
like,
I mean, there may
you
be
know.
elements that.
There may, yeah, but we have to be careful because it is an eclectic mix of buildings.
right,
That we have some, very utilitarian buildings, which are still
right.
nice to have. So we have like the,
But how we organize the green spaces, or what we
yeah,
set for roof
pocket
heights,
parks or
or,
things like
yeah.
that, something we talked about. But, there is, I can't think of it, there's the automobile repair place that's,
Castle Tire, or
no, the one,
so many, Jiffy Lube, I could.
no, not those. I mean, the one in the brick building that's right across from Town Pantry.
One fine
A1
auto.
auto, one fine auto.
One Fine Auto. I
He's
mean,
so
that
nice.
is, it's an old building. It's,
Right.
I think it brings its particular charm to that corner.
Mhm.
And as you move on, you see so many different, there isn't this one thing which defines it. There are certainly clusters of things which kind of work as you move around this curving street, which
That's
could
exactly
define it.
right. There's
So-
sections to it.
So I think that's the difficulty I see in that, saying it's more like, how do we identify an area which
Mhm.
maybe not be cohesive architecturally, but is cohesive in terms of its closeness to the street. It's positioned geographically within an area which is kind of walkable and is associated with one particular neighborhood.
Well,
Yeah.
that was what I was gonna say about if we take all the ground floor retail and commercial out of the street because suddenly there's this great demand for first floor housing, it takes away from that notion, which I haven't really internalized all the details of the 15-minute neighborhood.
Right, I wonder how we can incentivize,
Right,
first floor retail,
Well,
even if we have
We do it
first
for the
floor.
PUD, right? I mean, the PUD does that, and that is incentivizes more, higher FAR, should you do a first floor, retail, commercial, plus a diversity of housing. I mean, that's sort of the idea behind Ten Converse, was
Yeah,
that
it's-
incentive.
It's the diversity of housing, I think that's going to, so currently it is incentivized for commercial in that you can only put 4 units above, if you put commercial on the first floor. That's what
Which
the
is what
exist.
3A would change.
Yeah, but we're talking about all the way up North Main, right?
Right.
So then, for the 3A, you could say, by right, you can do this, but then if you put ground floor, you can incentivize to do more.
Yes, I see, okay.
Yeah.
But the 3A is, again, I think there's a natural place to put the higher density, which is south of Clark Street, because we don't have to worry much about the back of the neighbors. As you go up North Main Street, we want to be able to respect the limitations of the narrower lots. And, I mean, one of the things that our original consultant, who did the initial conditions survey, who said, look at these individual lots and see, is there a way you can go deeper? If not, then let's not, but take a look. I mean, I believe we should protect those neighbors.
I do too.
But it's also one of these things where we need to look at the context.
And I feel like the context is very granular. So
So-
on the one hand, you want it to be a cohesive pedestrian experience. It's only a mile. I mean, everybody walks a mile just before noon.
Yeah, I go up and down the stairs a lot,
Right.
but not a mile's
But
worth.
so you want cohesion, but you also, so that experience of the corridor, and then, but it's also, it unfolds as you go from one block to the next almost. So it's being granular and sensitive.
So,
what
like,
can they do that would?
one example of something like that we could put in the zoning would be, if your lot is X deep, then you can do this. If it's beyond X deep, then you can do this, right? So like that then takes care of the depth and the neighboring lots issue. So, I mean, just sort of, I think to your point, Carrie, like what does that final document look like and what are examples that we can look to in order to guide us going there? Maybe the design guidelines of the CBD is one example of just like what it might look like in the outcome in zoning. So, those are some of the rules I guess we could do in terms of making sure that it's sensitive enough to the
Right.
neighboring things, like,
Right.
beyond X, you can build up, or whatever it is, or you
Also-
can build parking only on the back if you were this wide, or.
Right, exactly, yeah.
Or if you do a green wall or a tree buffer or something along between them.
Well, and I think that our zoning guidelines or bylaws will have to, they should include plant buffers, light intrusion,
And
things that-
traffic is gonna be a huge, I mean, that
traffic's
area is
gonna
such a
be
mess,
just-
so they don't do traffic studies or any of those.
Well, so that's to the point of traffic, this is why the complete streets thing was all rolled into it, which was that we would be able to carve at least some bike lane identification. The street, it doesn't fully accommodate it.
Right.
And the area is complicated in terms of dealing with cut-throughs, because I know there's been a problem in a number of the neighborhoods of people trying to avoid lights
Right.
and how you protect them. But then you discover that if you shut this off, then they'll go over there. It's a fluid. The fluid moves
Yep.
wherever it can.
Well, they're
Oh,
all over
but-
the towns.
We
They
have
have no entry between 7 AM and
There are,
noon.
I recall, 10, 15 years ago, discussions about redoing some of the traffic flow in that area. And as soon as you said one street should go this way, then another street would pop up and say, but that's gonna negatively affect us. So it requires an awful lot of thing. But I need to get us back to the concrete question as to what are we asking Form in Place to do for the next 4 weeks?
Okay, so they can't
So
do
what
anything.
can we have them do? I know that you had mentioned
Yeah, so if you have
that we
that,
can have form-based code.
Well, no, we can't start writing code yet. I would like to ask them to walk us through the process of translating all the research and test fitting that they did into some kind of consensus of the board that this section of the east side or this section of the west side will be zoned for this height, or this density, or this setback, or this open space, that you turn it into actual requirements. And a parallel part of this is that we have to update the uses table for GBD 3 and GBD 2. Which is a little bit of a clearer exercise, at least on the surface. But I would like them to walk us through the conversation that gets us to some consensus of
Well,
understanding.
I guess that makes sense. So what you're saying is the conversation we are trying to have here would be more effective if they facilitated it.
do we need to answer questions 1 and 3 first?
Well, we definitely want to answer question 1 first.
Yeah.
And,
I mean,
and the key factors, number 3, yes.
But
Yes.
do we answer that before we ask them to help guide us? Because otherwise, we'll be answering the question while they're guiding us, and they'll say, now you've changed your mind.
Right,
it's just-
okay, so.
I think Sally drew answers from the master plan for one of your slides, was addressing some of this from
That's true. That was a good.
From,
your slide on sort of the interest of the town for that area
Right.
that we drew from the master plan. I think that was touched on in one of your slides. So as far as like, what would we present to them if they showed up next meeting and said, well, to lead that discussion, we would have to answer these questions, I think we
well,
would
the
say.
really big ones on this here are the frontage issues. So let's just start from the left
So
column.
that's a little bit more technical. I feel like we need to get a sense of what each board member sort of values in a sense of place, kind of a.
Yes, okay, that's
The
good.
feeling of space, like, is it, is there a node or like a area that, is there even an agreement on whether or not sort of a difference of commercial nodes or something?
Yeah.
There's need for a little bit more of a centralized commercial, crossroads. at various points along the road, or is it just one, or is it like, do we, you know, want people to all go downtown? You know, what is that sense?
One of
What's
them
the
was
one
an
of them?
extension of the center business. Yeah.
Yes.
Similar to the
So-
sense that it's the 5-minute walk concept.
Perhaps, I mean, that's not all agreed
Or
upon right
15-minute.
now, but like,
15-minute or whatever it is.
so if that's a central, you know, value that we would like to see here, then yes, or is it like and maybe there's a high priority of 3 things that you would really want to see here. Is it you know, non-car transit, like an ease of facilitating of that, so that would mean, you know, fewer cuts, what are those called?
Curb
Curb
cuts.
cuts. And, you know,
We would
short,
definitely be lessening curb cuts.
the street diets, right? Like, there's amenity zone, and there's, you know, the bike zone, and there's
Right.
whatever. We want that. We want a street diet. Or, you
And
know.
building height is to me a really big issue, and a flat top versus
So that's more
setbacks.
like an aesthetics issue, right? So you want to look at it
Are we allowed
like,
to
like
talk
a.
about aesthetics? Like,
Oh, yeah, but we obviously have to, because we're gonna be talking about design guidelines.
Right, so there's a style issue here, and
Right.
there's like maybe a tendency towards a more historic look. You know, there's maybe a tendency towards, you know, an eclectic, like let's, you know, but there are different priorities within this board too, right?
Yeah, I mean, when you're talking about this, it makes me think that, you know, for instance, if we say, we think that an acceptable density is this, and that within that density, we want an acceptable height. At that point, you can start talking, okay, now we can talk about style, because we can talk about what would look good with that sort of massing.
Yeah.
But until we start talking about these nodes, or what we envision for these different areas, we can't get to style, because we don't know how big it is we want it.
That's what I mean, though. Do we want to start with the principles of the center business districts and say, for downtown, maybe we want it to be, you know, 2 to 3 stories, but for North Main, it could be 3 to 4 stories, but we want the general, you know, design, you know.
I mean, it would be nice to
the
have
roof
some kind of
line
a
or, you
framework
know.
that's already invented.
Well,
Or
and
just,
one
you
thing
just
I-
want to, not, you know, an echo somewhere.
They had a lot of really good examples of what they were envisioning when they did the test fit, which you just saw the flat colored version of, and they had pictures in their PowerPoint. And so the 2 PowerPoints that I pulled from, I'm going to give you the dates that, or I can just email the 2 to the entire board again. They're buried in our packets, is what it is.
So trying to
just do
move
that.
into what they can do for this in the next 4 weeks, and
Yeah.
how we can answer these questions. So I like the idea of using their expertise and knowledge of existing development to maybe give us examples of what something would look like. And Sally pointed out they've given us some of those in their presentations.
I mean, I could just
But if we
do
were
the
to
next
say-
PowerPoint.
Let's start at the north and work our way down south. Because I get, I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I get the feeling that this board would prefer to see less intensive development north and have it increase towards the CBD.
Yes.
Now, I could be wrong about that, because we haven't actually had a discussion.
There's also I mean, I remember when I was looking at the map for 3A, I was thinking about maybe we put some, you know, a mix of like, you know, multi-use to including the first floor as a cluster. So you sort of have a commercial district that's already exists in the center business district, where you preserve first floor commercial to a point, and then you allow first floor residential. So you just create sort of 2 little centers. You know, so you don't go back to first floor commercial for a stretch, because the continuous parcels can have a street between them. So maybe this is residential, and then we go back to first floor commercial. Sorry, the later it gets, the more I use my hands.
Yeah.
Oh, it's
Well,
9:40.
what
it's
she
9:48.
said, what she said, I agree.
And then I don't want to talk without them here.
No, I don't either. We don't have a quorum.
You do, 3.
Oh, quorum is 3? I
Yeah.
guess it is, yeah.
Okay, it's not red wine, clearly.
Oh my God. The time I spilled red wine on a white carpet at a friend's house. Will I ever live it down?
Yeah.
It was a white carpet or something?
It was a white carpet and it was red wine.
Oh, well, if you have enough wine, then you can just turn the entire carpet.
Oh, it was a terrible thing that I did.
Okay, I think we're
Oh, sorry about the disruption of the meeting.
So.
But so to your point about, can you just loop right back to the,
Yeah,
The node, so, by right housing between the
so
CBD
so
and
that for
then.
for the 3A, we need to have continuous parcels of multifamily housing that goes to the first floor. So if we think of sort of like that as across the street from each other to break up zones that are first floor commercial. So, these residents have access to the center business district for their sort of retail and whatever needs, and then there's a residential, and then we sort of reintroduce first floor commercial.
which would argue for the opposite of what Diab recommended.
Right, that's what I'm saying,
which
there's
is
two different ways to look at
That we should
it.
focus at the lower end first to decide what we want for zoning height and setback and style south of Clark.
Right, also that'll get us into 3A, which I think is really important to get our hands into
Right,
as soon as possible.
right.
So can we pay them to have a meeting with the 3A consultants, or is that?
Well, they actually are, they're
Okay,
working.
okay.
The 3A consultants are more really technically about getting this map.
Okay.
And probably 3A is.
But if they give us one map and we decide with these guys on another map.
The key is the map that we come up with just has to fit in within,
Their GIS model.
the fact is that we have enough land, we can move a few things around, but if we're going to redo up to Clark Street, then I think that's where we would say, we're gonna have a higher density of residential.
Right,
But that's where the incentives for first floor commercial, if we say, yeah, these people need amenities, maybe they don't want to walk all the way to the CBD because they have to cross X big roads to get there, because it is.
sure.
I think it would be easier to start below Clark, because that problem
Yeah, it's a whole
Is-
set of problems.
is constrained a little more than the.
Well, and it has
Sure.
less neighborhood impacts as Diab.
Either way, we end up
I
doing
was,
the
I
whole
was
road.
gonna, either end has its controversies, so I just chose a different controversy than the 3A controversy, so, yeah, but maybe that's, if we talk to them and we say, our consensus seems to be that we're okay, that this is going to be a higher density area, we want to be able to put in some commercial as amenities for the residents, because it may not be sort of the resource for commercial for the neighborhoods north of Clark Street, although some of them might come down, because with any luck, they'll be able to go north and get their,
Yeah.
their,
Exactly, right.
their amenities. But it certainly,
Their nails done.
it kind of gives us a locus for discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the incentive question is very important, because I think once something is built for residential only, then it sort of becomes that in perpetuity. And our town is very much in need of more commercial spaces, and once they disappear, I think that will be the end of it, right? So the incentivizing even for the places that we are gonna allow for by right housing, to incentivize the first floor, I think would be a very smart move for us to just keep it alive, increase the 4% of commercial tax base by a little bit.
Yeah, that's,
We can't keep decreasing it, it's gonna just all go.
I think that's important. I agree with the idea that I would like to see more retail and commercial.
Retail,
Well,
restaurant,
see,
commercial,
that's-
and office.
So that's an interesting
But
question.
I want to understand the incentives, when the time comes,
Yeah.
to see what they involve.
So-
And
so-
if there are trade-offs that
Yeah.
might be of concern.
I'm intrigued by the question is, there's a difference between commercial and retail. So
There is.
one of the things is that, for instance, if you have commercial, which is office space,
Oh, okay, retail, I
and
guess.
so then you would have, there's a need, who knows what life is gonna be like
Yeah.
5 years from now.
Uh,
But traditionally, people left their homes, they went to work somewhere, they brought their commerce to that place, and then the local businesses couldn't depend upon daily, people walking in because they're all off somewhere else working. If there's office space, then you do get that sort of custom during the
Well,
day.
that's true.
Yeah,
This-
but
this
that's
is-
dying,
yeah,
that's the
you
whole,
mentioned this,
that's
but-
San Francisco.
Well, but there is, so there was an interesting program, On Point, which is a BOR program, and they were discussing the demise of commercial real estate in large urban centers.
Right.
And they were talking about how some of it, not all of it, but some of it is actually moving out to where people live. And they talked about, how, suburban commercial real estate parks are just these horrible, sterile places. If you've, in the Midwest, that's what you see. But a commercial real estate or a commercial office park in Winchester would not be a sterile place.
Right, and if we mix it with retail, so.
Yeah,
it's sort
so
of
how do we
parked next to
provide
it.
incentives that don't force us into a particular lane in terms of what commercial will be?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing, is that I know we like to have lively streets, but to be honest, if someone has an office in there, they're still occupying and they're paying commercial tax rates, and they may not be providing, some lively exchange with people walking by, but they are serving a valid, business.
Well, they do have employees going in there and coming
Yes, they
out
do,
again.
yeah.
Might need,
And they have
Yes,
clients, like
services.
say it's
Yeah,
a
yeah.
tax accountant.
But they're not, it's not like a,
It's
there
not
isn't,
like
it's not a retail.
Correct, yeah.
So, but, understanding how we incentivize, we don't want to focus on one particular type of commercial, because no one can predict what will happen,
Right,
but,
yeah, I was a bit surprised that there was housing on almost every parcel they presented, like I.
There was
I
only
did think
two
we
where they
were-
didn't do housing, that's
Right,
right.
and that, I think that would, I would rather, I don't know, we'll see a few scenarios, but I do think we need.
So I
some-
think that it may have been that something we said in the course of developing this assignment for them was, we need more housing in town, and we need more diverse housing. We need all kinds, from studios to 3 bedrooms, et cetera.
Yeah, but I don't know if we need it on every single parcel in town.
Right, exactly. And also, every one of those parcels isn't gonna happen.
Right,
Right.
right.
yeah. But there is, there's a thing that if you don't have a high enough density of residents, you will not get a surviving commercial district. A lot of the things that we think about, when I think about thriving commercial districts, I'm thinking about, like Brookline, some parts of Brookline where you go and you're like, wow, it's just packed
Just a
with
buzz.
the shops.
It's a
But then
buzz.
that's because they have a high density of residents who can support that.
Somerville.
Yeah, or Somerville. And so you're like,
Yeah, but this town would flip over if they heard us turning into Somerville.
it's, if the town wants more commercial, then we need to provide a way to support that commerce as well.
Mhm.
And so,
Yeah, no, I'm with you.
Well, this is where I think the public outreach comes in, and I really do think that we want to have a facilitated conversation with representatives from the commercial business owners in town. That's restaurants, it's retail, it's office buildings, and, service businesses, looking at all the uses. But to do this without that input,
well, I would love to see input from someone who studies what's going on in the commercial space. I mean, and the thing, not that I discount the experience of our local business people, but we need to be looking out 10, 15, 20 years, which
this
is impossible.
Yes.
But trying to understand what's going on around us. Like this MAPC report about the fact that local manufacturing in Massachusetts is now at its highest point ever, essentially,
Yeah.
was really shocking to me.
Mhm.
It really, I did not think that was a thing. I thought that, the small scale, sort of boutique manufacturing driven by the defense industry was the high point of local manufacturing in New England. And that was, 20, 30 years ago, and I thought we were on a decline. But learning that it's actually on the rise is really fascinating. So we don't want to miss out on that sort of knowledge.
So the knowledge is about the demand and about the mix.
Yeah. And so moving forward, seeing that it's now 10 o'clock,
Yeah, I know.
do we want to set up a meeting with Foreman Place and say, we want to start south of Clark. We want to understand what 3A does for that particular piece of ground, or that particular section.
Yeah.
We understand we need a minimum density. We have a range of densities that they provided us, in a sense, from, you asked them that question.
Yeah, they gave us, well, yeah.
We need to be comfortable saying, okay, talk to us a bit about what the massing looks like. Then we need to make a decision saying, yeah, this is the massing that we're comfortable with. Let's move on and talk about what are the incentives if we want to increase commercial.
Right.
How will that change the massing in terms of if you add another floor that's commercial, do you take away a floor of residential? Or do you say, well, no, you just have to move it back so that you can accommodate both? Because adding commercial is losing money, in a sense.
To a developer, it is. Yeah, there's much
Because they can
bigger
get so
return.
much more. I mean, just look at the property taxes, the assessed values of any of the small, the 4/1 sort of residential over commercials. And just the one across from, right north of Swanton, it's got insurance on the first floor, and it's got 4 units above. Last I checked, the insurance place was rated at like 125, 150,000. And those units above it were all above 500,000.
Oh, absolutely.
So there's a real, incentivizing the commercial means you gotta give something to them so they can make up that.
I feel like this is we need a meeting perhaps with the select board or somebody who is more in the finance space of this, this town to understand what the goals are there for adding.
Yeah, what would the
That.
tax revenue of this scenario be versus the tax
Correct,
revenue?
yeah.
What's the, yeah.
That's outside of our wheelhouse here, but, if there is, I'm sure there is a lot of interest in how Main Street would be developed from those different perspectives. But I don't know if that's, am I not, is that something that you're?
No, it's something I don't know, yeah, that's a
Yeah,
good question.
I think that input, because we are, kind of dealing with form and the feel of a space, but what about sort of the financial economic
I mean,
impacts here?
what if that comes back and it says you gotta build all residential because that's where all the money is? I mean, do we still say, okay,
Oh, no, do you think that would be the case? I don't think that that's,
I don't know.
I think a lot of the things.
The rental building, the owner pays the commercial tax rate, which is the same as the residential tax rate, except for the portion of our residential taxes that are related to water and sewer, and they pay more.
I'm talking more about the mix of commercial versus residential and
Right.
how that feels
Mixed,
to
not to the revenue.
somebody
to the
like
tax.
the select board.
Yeah.
I think it all depends on how many bedrooms. And so one of the questions will be, if the residentials are 3-bedroom, then you're gonna have kids, and then
Yep,
you've
there
got your
goes the
10K per
cost.
kid who goes into, so
That is
that's,
why the 3A is no, violations if you
yeah.
prohibit.
But you can incentivize and say, if you build smaller units, because we do have a need for smaller units in town.
Yeah,
right?
So rather than saying you can't build big units, we just say, if you build smaller units,
more.
then that would shift the
Well,
balance.
what's one thing you would give them?
You could build more units. You could reduce, say, the parking requirements. You could say, okay, you don't need 2 cars per unit.
Right. I mean, I think, as we talk about this,
Yeah.
I think we need to be also careful that we provide enough parking for people.
Well, and, yes, to that point,
But,
exactly.
but yeah, okay.
But one of the
There-
things he
there is
made
a-
reference to.
It's interesting. There is a worldwide, not just national, trend towards reducing parking requirements.
There is.
Mhm.
I think that there's,
But we don't have the infrastructure
Right, so
here.
with this, we can also incentivize the building out of that infrastructure, like if you have, the charging stations, or if you have the bus stop, you improve on the bus stop or the bike lanes, like that incentivizes you to do something else too.
Right, but that's not gonna,
but
I mean,
I think there's a difference, Nick, between like south of Clark Street and say north of Clark Street, in terms of south of Clark Street, you're right near the downtown. You can get a train. You can grab a bus. The bus comes every hour, or maybe.
wait, are you saying that you need fewer
You
cars?
may need fewer cars.
No, I would disagree. Unless
I
you're,
disagree.
yeah, I would disagree. Anyone in
It's a tough
Winchester,
area
anyone
to
in
be
Winchester, no
carless.
matter where they live, needs the same amount of cars.
I think that
We only have one
is,
car.
I think there's a selection effect though.
What was that?
We only have one car as a family.
No, I know.
But I think
But-
people who choose to live people self-select for areas. If they don't need a car, they will select an area where they don't have to pay for an extra spot.
Right.
Because it costs around $26,000 per parking spot, which is absorbed by some.
Annually,
No, that's how much it costs to
Construction
build
costs,
the
right.
structure. So there's a cost to putting in
Yeah, but
parking.
I don't, I don't see anyone subsisting on public transportation in this town.
there are people who live downtown. We have lots of people who live downtown without lots of parking.
Right, CBD
Right,
residents.
but they have cars.
Where are they parking their cars?
I don't know.
They have no parking.
Well,
They aren't,
There is a finite number of town permits
They
that
are-
are available to people who are residents of the CBD.
I understand that, but I think that,
I mean, New York City has a subway system, and it works pretty well.
but you don't,
And the density is orders of magnitude higher than ours.
But I
And
don't-
theirs works pretty well. I've used it. and
there
it's-
are
it's
different
pretty good.
parts of town which have different, the people who choose to live in an area, they will self-select and say, I don't need to have 2 spots. I only need 1.
Thank you, Rich.
The fact that this apartment house or this condo only has 1 is fine by me because I don't need 2. So I think that we will continue this discussion.
Right.
We're not gonna resolve this.
Right.
No, we're
I-
not.
I really think-
You asked the salient question, I'm looking at the
I
clock,
mean, we
which
should
is,
probably, yeah.
can we
should
get a
probably- We
meeting
should probably have a
with them?
continuing.
So why don't we-
continuation.
So why don't we do this? So
Yeah.
we'll, Sally and I will reach out to Michael and John. We'll say, we have decided on, we're gonna focus on south of Clark. We're gonna focus on the densities required to get through MBTA 3A. We will use those as, we would like you to come and to facilitate our decision-making process as we winnow down the things that we need to worry about,
that we need to make decisions on.
need to make decisions on. We need to think really hard about questions 1 and 3 to understand that, and we need to think about the populations we want to serve and what they're going to want in 10, 20, 30 years. And understand that what we see around us today is going to be very different from what we see in the future.
To the extent that our design guidelines permit that very different or direct the expression of that very different.
Yeah, I mean, it's a balance between flexibility,
Right,
because we don't want to tie future generations to something which doesn't work for them.
right.
And-
I liked what you said immediately about
Well,
about
I mean,
meeting
future
needs.
generations also have their own ability to amend
But-
whatever.
But
Their own
It-
preferences.
some things can't be changed. For instance, the fact that this town decided to take a big chunk of light industrial and turn them into residential, we can never go back.
That's true.
Anytime you take a building and you turn it into a condo, you never go back.
That's right.
Because you, all of a sudden, you have 15,000 owners, none of whom will agree that this building should be removed.
Also, rental housing has a long-term benefit to our
Yeah.
town in terms of safe harbor.
So some things are flexible, but some choices we will never be able to undo. It's just facts on the ground which cannot be undone unless you just find some way to bulldoze, but that ain't gonna happen, so.
So would we want them to come to a regularly scheduled planning board meeting, or would we want to
Yeah.
have a special working minute session?
How long of a session do we want to have with them? Is it gonna be an hour, an
I
hour
mean,
and
if
a
we're
half?
going into this in the same way, I mean, we're leaving it and going into that, I just don't think that we're ready. I think, I think perhaps, I think they've been asking us for priorities.
But we needed to wait to wrap our head around what they'd given us, which is hopefully this is a start.
Okay.
Because I certainly couldn't wrap, it took,
Yeah, thank you for that
So
work.
that, but also, I think they've given us some, so in the master plan, there's some very interesting
Yeah.
case studies. In their materials that they have sent us, there's case studies. And those case studies can be really useful to understanding what we've done. Also, to go back and look at all of the images. I'm gonna make sure that
Yeah.
the 3 PowerPoints that they sent me get to all of us again. We've seen them, but, it was just like,
We should just put them on the website.
yeah, we can do that.
That might be the best.
And
Let's
ask
make sure they're on the
Jen.
website.
Okay.
So,
So is there some way for
Ask
each of
Jen.
us to do some like high priority, musts here for them? Say, either it's, we must fulfill 40B or 3A, we must increase our commercial tax base. We must increase the transit-oriented nature of that.
Also increase bicycle and pedestrian safety, because
Yeah,
that will
so
limit
either like
cars.
3 to 5, like high-level priorities, or either, you know, keep the consistency of the style of some kind of historic feel, you know, whatever that high priority is, but those are your top 3 to 5, right? Because
And
I don't think,
these are operating premises, what would you call them?
Or like-
Tenants?
like, outcomes, maybe? What is your highest best wish for this? What is the high priority? We could want everything,
guess
but
we
it's
should
hard to
figure
get everything.
And remember that what we're doing here is we're zoning for an evolving outcome over decades, or let's just say even the
Yeah.
next 2 decades.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's try to keep it within a time scale we can.
Like that we'll still be alive.
I mean, I think I need time to digest the power.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so
It
complex.
really feels out of context. It's-
And
it's-
I mean, a
So-
map
Can
would
we,
make
Yeah.
can
sense.
we skip the town day update, or do we have to talk about it?
I think
I
we
think
can
we
skip
skip
it,
it.
because I think it's time to go to bed.
It is.
So,
Yeah, I have a
so,
motion.
just to finish the discussion, or to come up with an action, are we going to wait until we make up our minds a little more before we reach out to them?
Or should we set
I
a
think you
deadline?
should reach out to them, but I do think that we should come to them with some sort of
Yes.
motive, right? Because a lot of it is just absorbing. We've been absorbing for many, many weeks with them, or months now.
Right.
I think they are expecting something from us.
They're expecting some clarity and consensus from us about what
I
you
mean, can we
said.
just put to them the problem of the 3A and say, this
Oh,
is.
they
If that's
know
your
the problem.
priority, that's your priority.
They're already in the 3A consultant team.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, but we have the density, we have the units. It's a question of what do we do with those areas? That's, I mean, there's not a,
Okay.
yeah, I mean, but I
okay,
think we
yeah.
need to, so what, Sal and I will reach out to them, tell them that we've had this discussion, but that we're not yet ready to give them solid enough direction. And when can we expect to give them that direction, knowing that we only have a few weeks left on the contract in which to spend the money? That's the real question. I'm sure that, I don't know what they're, I'm also sure that they probably, going towards the end of the fiscal year, everyone's giving them last minute things to
Yeah, I
spend
think I
money.
joined after the contract.
Well,
Can
I think
can
that
see
there's
the
a thing
contract?
in the budget where we can encumber the money because we've asked them to do it, but it might take longer than June.
Let's go and talk
Like a
to the
retainer.
comptroller on that
Okay.
again.
Yeah.
That would be the best solution.
But so, one option would be, is that we think really hard, and we schedule a really short meeting to come up with just our top 10 list of things we're concerned about that we can give them,
Okay.
or 5, or however
I think
many.
that's- I don't know. I think that's gonna feel rushed, or,
What did you say, a 10-minute meeting?
No, a 10 list.
5 priorities.
We are rushed, Nick, unfortunately, that's just if we wanna, the problem is, if we don't spend this money, we lose it.
Well, we will spend it, there's no question about that, because
well,
there's
we should have
There
them
must
facilitate it
be-
then. If we're gonna lose it, we should just have them facilitate the meeting.
What's the extension of your presentation that you wish
Unless
you
you
were
can
able to
encumber.
wave a wand and
So,
have happen?
so what I had hoped to, what it would have been great to put in, but I ran out of time to create the PowerPoint and I ran out of time to present it.
No, I mean, what's the next, go ahead.
Is the shapes of the buildings associated with each of the mixes and heights and densities that are all in, their pictures are all in those PowerPoints.
But they've already given us that. I mean, if you could take there must be, you're the person who should answer the question of what should we have them do next, because you've digested it kind of the most comprehensively.
Well, what we should have them do next is, what we give them next is exactly what I Ching focused in on, which is the short and really crafted list of outcomes and priorities and tenets.
Yeah, number 1, right? What Winchester needs are we seeking to address? What, to you guys all, what are we trying to address here? Why were you seeking this position? What do you think the people who elected you are trying to address? And also by April 24th, Springtown meeting, what's the story here that we're like, I think we should start thinking about that, like, how are we gonna present this, and what is it that we, imagine showing up at town meeting in April, and what is it that's gonna sort of, we're presenting them to vote on, really?
I think of the needs that we're addressing as a combination of corridor needs and housing needs. And included in corridor needs is the commercial, it's also the safety, it's also the aesthetics.
But to bring us back to 10:15.
Yeah, we gotta go.
So then what we need to come up with now is what is the next actual step we're going to
Yeah.
take?
Schedule a meeting with them, and that's our deadline to get clarity what we want to bring to the meeting. And let's have it in 2 to 4 weeks.
2 to 4 weeks will be mid-June. Okay.
Well, let's do it in 2 weeks then.
We'll talk to them, find out what their schedule is like. We will let the board know. I like your idea, Nick. If we're going to lose the money, then we should use it to give us some clarity and have them come in and facilitate.
Absolutely what we do.
My concern is they'll say, we are urban planners, not urban facilitators, but we'll work that out.
Oh, no, I think that this is right up there.
Okay, well then I just,
Facilitate these kinds of conversations.
so let us have that conversation with them, and figure out, but we need to, next time we meet, we have to have with them, they need real direction. They need to know this is the path we have to go, because at some point, even if it's not prior to June 31st,
30th.
whatever, 30th, they need specific direction so they can start writing in the next 6 months
Right.
what it is that's going to show up at town meeting.
Well, and timeline to town meeting is just ridiculously tight.
Especially for the planning board, because we are very deliberate.
Well, and also because it's zoning.
Yeah, people
It's
are,
real, it's big. So is there a motion?
Hold on 1 second.
Would it make sense to have everybody write down what their priorities are and send them to Sally?
Yes.
Nancy's so smart.
Everyone, please send your ideas of what you think
I'm
is
still trying to
important.
formulate what we're allowed to ask for.
Ask for what you want,
Yeah,
Like a monorail.
ask.
and we'll focus it down.
If you don't ask for it, we
Yeah, a
won't know that you want
monorail would be a great idea.
Questions as a framework.
it. Yes, use the big questions as the
Yes.
framework.
yes,
Nancy, would you like to join us at the table?
please.
The salary is so much less on this side.
Dane told me he'd move to Winchester and join the planning board because he's been recording every planning board meeting.
Oh, wow. Okay, so speaking of which,
I'm putting words rashly in your mouth, sir.
okay, so, I would welcome a motion.
To adjourn.
A second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much, WinCam. Thank you very much, everyone
Basta.
who stayed with us
All right.
out there in TV land.
Very good, Sally.
We will see you